Chapter 1371. Austria, the town of Hallstatt. Ring, ring, ring. When the bell rang, customers began to stream into the bakery. Several employees began to take out the freshly baked bread, and it was quickly sold out. The little girl of the Wandos family was only 10 years old this year, but she was much shorter than her peers. She came early to buy bread from the bakery, but when the door was opened, she couldn't successfully enter the bakery from the crowded ladies. She sat outside the window of the bakery with some annoyance. These ladies were really crazy. It was mainly because Mr. Baiji, the owner of the bakery and the baker, was too handsome. According to her father, Mr. Wandos, Mr. Baiji was almost the enemy of all the men in the town. Didn't buy bread today again? Just as she was vexed and didn't know how to explain it when she returned, a pleasant voice rang in the ears of the little girl from the Wandos family. The little girl raised her head and saw a black-haired, dual-colored-eyed young man wearing a baker's uniform. "Mr. Baiji!" The child of the Wandos family suddenly shouted. The young man, Mr. Baiji, made a small gesture and then stuffed a craft paper bag with bread into the hands of the little girl of the Wandos family. "This is also just made. Take it." "Thank you, Mr. Baiji." The little girl of the Wandos family held the paper bag happily and then looked at the eyes of the bakery owner curiously. Every time she looked at it, it was so beautiful, like a pair of gem-like eyes, brown and blue eyes. She heard from her mother that this was a pure natural color, but only a few people in the world could have it. It was caused by some kind of morbid mutation. Although it was essentially a disease, it gave this young man a pair of charming eyes. "Why?" The young man squatted down and asked with a smile. The little girl of the Wandos family curiously asked, "Mr. Baiji, when you were a child, were you laughed at by other children because of this pair of eyes?" The young man thought for a moment and said, "When I was a child, I was often regarded as a child of the devil, and I was indeed bullied a lot. However, it was a long time ago." "Ah, a child. You actually believe in the existence of the devil. How despicable." The little girl from the Wandos family was instantly displeased. "She clearly has such beautiful eyes." The young man rubbed the child's head and smiled casually. After all, at that time, people were still in awe of legends like demons. "All right, hurry back. The bread won't taste good when it's cold." Yeah. The little girl skipped away. Not long after, the bakery was emptied of goods, and the staff simply closed the door. It was only the beginning of the day, but the business was really good. It was as if they were mocking the nearby shops by closing their doors early. Business is good today. After closing, the young man chatted with the shop assistants for a while before asking them to go home. Only then did he return to his residence upstairs. The young bakery owner seemed to be a minimalist. Only the most basic furniture could be seen in the room upstairs. There wasn't even an extra decoration on the cement wall. There was only a small plate of roses planted on the windowsill. But there was still something eye-catching in the room. There was a short table in the middle of the room, and a huge castle made of transparent dice was placed on it. The castle wasn't really completed, only about 60% to 70% completion. The young boss brought a glass of water, then sat on the cushion in front of the table. He picked up a pair of tweezers, picked up a die, and gently placed the die on the west tower of the castle that was about to be completed. His movements were careful, steady, and slow. He put down the tweezers and began to sit quietly. Because he had completed today's portion, he would only place one die every day. At this time, on the undecorated cement wall, a rectangular mirror strangely, slowly floated up. There were ripples on the surface of the mirror like water. A mark of the big Arcana card, the sun, began to appear on the mirror. I didn't guess wrong. Yari's failure was even faster than expected. The voice came from the mirror, the voice of this sun seat. The young man, Baiji, looked at his dice castle at this time. After a while, he said casually, "Speaking of which, why are you so sure that Yari's will fail? In fact, I think his idea is not bad. There's no harm in experimenting. We can't always stay at the theoretical stage. You underestimate the strength of the Shinryu of Kelowna. She's not only the Shinryu of Kelowna, but also the princess of the Xinyuan royal family. If you can't kill her, You will face her crazy revenge. Actually, it's really scary when you think about it. Baiji suddenly smiled. This kind of power shouldn't exist in this world. If it really makes a big scene, he stopped here. Baiji shook his head and continued. Okay, I will propose to remove Yari's seat later. A new substitute should be able to take office soon. After all, after this time, the Magician Association probably won't do anything and just wait and see. In addition, the last time we offended the little princess of the Xianyuan royal family. And now, Kelowna Shinryu is added. I suddenly feel worried about the future of the association. After a moment of silence, Sun suddenly said, Shinryu, is it really only in this world? It's really only in this world. Baiji's voice was abnormally firm. Among all the worlds I've seen, only this world exists. Unique. Even the Xianyuan Palace is unique. Not only that, there are too many intersections of legends here. It's like the origin of these legends themselves. Your apocalypse? Baiji shook his head. I don't know why, but I can't see it recently. I can't get any inspiration from the will of the world for the time being. I just vaguely feel that the will of the world seems to have changed. It really feels like an unscrupulous investor changed the script because of personal preferences. Specifically? I don't know. Baiji still shook his head. But since there are no new revelations, that means the previous revelations should not have changed. Since Michael is the chosen one, the protagonist of the end of the world, here, it should be the same as the other worlds. All of us in Otherworld are doing this in various ways. Then, we just need to do what was originally said. I hope so. Son, his voice paused for a while, then suddenly said, By the way, the position of the Divine General of Tyrant should be vacant, right? Indeed, it has been vacant. Baiji nodded. Although we can't confirm Nero's life or death at this stage, from the disappearance of this period of time and Yamato's deception, it is enough to judge that Nero betrayed us. Do you have any plans? San said indifferently, I plan to let a new clone of mine take this position. The Xianyuan Palace is no longer suitable for me to cultivate a clone, so I will leave it with you for the time being. You can use it as you wish. Isn't he already on the way? You don't have to ask me specifically, right? Baiji looked back and glanced at the mirror. According to the rules, I still have to tell you. The fool. The ripples on the mirror gradually disappeared as the sound stopped. Even a mirror slowly disappeared on the cement wall. At this time, Baiji picked up the tweezers again and picked up a new piece of dice. But in the end, he didn't put the dice back up, but put it down. He quickly changed into a set of casual clothes and walked out of the door. The town could see the Alps, the colorful houses, and the tranquil and transparent lake. It was like a peach garden in a fairy tale world. Hello, Mrs. Ryder. The weather today is really good, Mr. Kinnick. No, I'm not hungry. Thank you. He lingered on such streets, greeted the people he knew on the road, and occasionally chatted with them. Time passed very slowly. Near the castle of Torito clan, Jean Luoyue and Elizabeth, who had come up from a small cave on the cliff, still felt unreal at this time. The third lady looked at the badge in the vampire girl's hand. This was the token given by the owner of the Radiance Tower. I still have some urgent things to deal with. You can take this token and come to the association to find me. I hope to see you soon. After that, the first leader of the association disappeared with a whoosh. Yes, it was a whoosh, and then disappeared. You, are we really going to the Magician Association? In fact, after being encouraged, the vampire girl was still somewhat hesitant. She always felt that even if she became the student of the first tower owner, it would be difficult to reach the charm of Monsieur. Why don't you give it a try? Jean Luoyue had her own plans. So far, she could only rely on Elizabeth. So, it was necessary to let Elizabeth, who she relied on, have a better development. Not to mention, she had really put in her feelings. You need a plan for your future, the third lady said seriously. In the past, if there was anything, perhaps your grandfather would help you and protect you. But now, you can only rely on yourself. You know better than me about the social class in the clan. Yes, that's right. Maybe the 13 clans will temporarily give you preferential treatment out of consideration. But what about the future? You know, when that guy was in South America, he just casually stole someone else's name. The clan, because of this false relationship, gave you some preferential treatment. However, who knows when this matter will be exposed? Can you imagine how angry those clan nobles will be? But if you become the student of the Radiance Tower, the situation will naturally be different. I understand. The vampire girl nodded. Speaking of which, her real age was much older than the third lady, but she slept for more time. But this did not mean that her mental development would remain slow after sucking blood for the first time. She was forming her own views at a speed that ordinary people could not understand. But what she did not know was that in this high-speed molding stage, the third lady of the Zhong family would have a profound impact on her. It's good that you understand. Zhong Luoyue smiled gratifyingly. Women are born weaker, but even so, it's not that we can't do anything. Because we are slightly inferior to men in terms of natural advantages, we should be even more adept at making use of all the conditions around us and strive to maximize our advantages. No matter in which aspect, passive and weak women will never be able to achieve real success, whether it's your life or love. Love? The little girl covered her face with her hands. This girl, did she hear the key words? The third lady sighed subconsciously, only feeling that there was still a long way to go. Not good. A patrol team is coming this way. The little girl let go of her hands at this time, looking at the night sky somewhere. Let's leave here first. The third lady thought for a while and said, there was no golden light, nor was there any light emitted by the technique. Kelowna Shinryu appeared in the small villa out of thin air. Kelowna Shinryu felt like she entered a barber shop, and then, under the barber's various persuasion, she finally applied for a bunch of package membership cards. Not only did she use the strategy, but she also used the teleportation service on the way back. It's really convenient, just this time, she said to herself, and then subconsciously pushed the door in the living room. Well, this profiteer is quite smart. He didn't directly push her inside. It's too abrupt. Actually, he's quite considerate. Thinking about it, Kelowna Shinryu, who originally planned to directly push the door, suddenly stopped. Then she tidied up her messy hair, pulled her clothes, and knocked on the door. Sister Long, you're back. The moment she opened the door, Long Shuo saw the little butterfly holding half a cake, her face covered with cake crumbs, and was stunned. Didn't I say you're not allowed to eat sweets? She was teaching a girl a lesson. Seeing that Master True Dragon's fingers began to pinch into a drill shape again, the little butterfly immediately showed a scared, stiff posture and stuffed the remaining half of the cake into her mouth first. Miss Long, welcome back. Boss Luo's voice came from the living room. I'll teach you a lesson later. Kelowna Shinryu could only glare at this Zhongshan butterfly fiercely. She was happily eating free desserts while he was fighting for his life outside. The little butterfly stuck out her tongue, then hid behind Kelowna Shinryu and followed into the living room. The desserts are just sugar substitutes. There's no side effect to the body. Boss Luo smiled and said, besides, with Miss Pinchin's digestive ability, it's okay even if you eat more. Miss Long, you don't need to care so much. It's none of your business. I'm being rude. Boss Luo waved his hand. Miss Long, are you satisfied with the service this time? What do you mean? The true dragon of godly land suddenly became shy. She touched the hair by her ear and turned her head away, stammering, well, anyway, thank you. It's great that you're satisfied. Boss Luo smiled and then snapped his fingers. A parchment scroll slowly unfolded in front of Kelowna Shinryu. Long Shirua shivered as if an ice cube was stuffed into the back of her neck. This is, as I said before, this is the contract for the set meal I ordered for you. Boss Luo smiled. Miss Long, please sign your name on the contract. She reached out her hand to the parchment. She had seen similar contracts before. Shinryu had signed one for Mo Xiaofei's health, but it was only a one-time contract. But this time, Shinryu's power seemed to be a little chaotic as her hand got closer to the parchment scroll. Is there any problem, Miss Long? She subconsciously looked at Luochio's eyes, suddenly remembering what happened in the basement of Mount Tai Villa that day. Her mind was in a mess, and then she imprinted her fingerprint on the contract. A dizzy feeling came, but it disappeared as quickly as it came. Kelowna Shinryu shook her head gently and felt nothing strange. Kelowna, Kunlun, 100 Tribulation Taoist, was sitting on a lonely peak, looking at the clouds and brewing tea alone. His hands trembled. The mountains of Kunlun trembled slightly, as if they were crying. The clouds in the sky were tumbling and didn't calm down for a long time. All the dragon veins in the world come from Kunlun. Now the mountains are crying. What's the matter? Is there another disaster? Chapter 1372. In a northern grassland, there was a grassland country connected to Kelowna, southern Gobi region. The convoy ran on the grassland and finally stopped in front of a small tribe. There were dozens of yurts scattered around, but there seemed to be some kind of mystery. It was said that if someone broke in, he would often lose his way. In the end, he didn't even know what happened and went back outside. The convoy stopped at the periphery of the tribe, and there was a man waiting on the withered grass. This man was called Mr. Dean. He was the bodyguard of the master that the convoy wanted to meet. At this time, a strong middle-aged man wearing a mink fur coat got off the car. A team of guards with sophisticated modern weapons lined up in 2 rows in front of the middle-aged man. Shigambala was the name of this middle-aged man. He was the descendant of Boer Jean. That is, the legitimate descendant of the Golden family. He was the descendant of the great Khan who once swept the entire European continent. Now, with the support of his family, he became one of the members of the Great Kyril Parliament. He had countless assets and even had several different identities of oligarchs in Russia. "Ha, Mr. Dean, we meet again." After getting off the car, Shigambala opened his hands and walked towards Mr. Dean, who was waiting here. He was very bold, but Mr. Dean didn't want to hug him. He smiled faintly and made an inviting gesture. "Mr. Shigambala, please come in. Master Ching has been waiting for a long time." Shigambala didn't care about Mr. Dean's indifference. He just smiled in a friendly way. He had seen Mr. Dean fight with his bare hands. He defeated a whole team of 50 well-equipped guards. He was like a Superman. "I brought some gifts." Shigambala clapped his hands at this time. "Mr. Dean, please give them to everyone in the tribe. It's not expensive, just some necessities. Please don't refuse." "Thank you so much." Mr. Dean nodded with a smile. Then 4 armed guards followed Mr. Shigambala and followed Mr. Dean into the innermost Mongolian tent. The 4 guards couldn't help but feel extremely nervous. The tribe wasn't big, and there weren't many people living here, but they could feel an enormous pressure from these people at all times. Even a child seemed to be extremely dangerous. Not long after, everyone stopped in front of a tent. Mr. Dean stood outside the curtain and said, "Mr. Shigambala, you can go in by yourself. Let your people wait outside. I know the rules." Shigambala nodded, then tightened the mink fur coat on his body. He took a leather case from the guard behind him, then opened the curtain and walked in. 2 rows of lit candles were enough to make the interior very bright. Shigambala could easily see Master Ching, who was visiting this time. He sat cross-legged on a praying mat. His hair was gray, but his face looked quite young, making it impossible to determine his true age. Moreover, Master Ching was an otherworldly expert who had all kinds of incredible means. In addition to Master Ching, there was another cold-faced, short-haired woman in the tent. She was a rare beauty. At least when Shigambala saw her for the first time, he was fascinated by her. But it was this thin woman who had terrifying skills that were not inferior to Mr. Dean. Shigambala was naturally no longer fascinated by her. Such a woman was not someone he could control. "Greetings, Master Ching." Shigambala was quite respectful, and then greeted the woman, "Miss Gong, we meet again. Sit down. I have nothing to greet you here." Master Ching waved his hand. "There are some tea leaves that you can taste. They're newly picked after the spring rain in the Jiangnan area." Shigambala said, "Master Ching, tea and chat is not enough. Let's talk about serious things first. This time, I'm here to ask you to help me find something." "Please say." So Shigambala put the suitcase in his hand on the blanket, and the opening was facing Master Ching. Then he stared at Master Ching's eyes and slowly opened the suitcase. "Master Ching, do you recognize this thing?" There was a photo pasted on one side of the suitcase, and there was a box at the bottom. Master Ching's gaze fell on the photo. After staring at it for a moment, There was a slight change in his gaze, and he muttered to himself. His fingers began to pinch, which seemed to be some kind of arithmetic hand gesture. "How is it, Master Ching? This is Fuxi Nuwa stone." Mr. Ching stopped pinching, but at this time he was looking at the box in the suitcase. "Yes," Shigambara nodded. "This is the sacred object of our golden family. When it was passed down to the fourth generation of Heshwat prince, it was missing. Until today, our golden family has never given up on finding the sacred object. God has not let us down. We finally have some clues. Master, continue to look." Master Ching waved his hand at this time, and Miss Gong, who was waiting behind him, went straight forward. She reached for the box in the suitcase and gave it back. According to legend, the Fuxi Nuwa stone is a naturally formed yin and yang stone. The yang stone is like the male root, and the yin stone is like the female root. The two stones intersect naturally and form one, which means the intersection of yin and yang. Legend has it that it even contains the mystery of life. In the past, Prince Heshwat used the appearance of the Fuxi Nuwa stone as a model to build two wonders, the human root peak and the Mother Gate cave, for the people to worship. Master Ching stroked the box in his arms, but he was not in a hurry to open it, as if he was thinking about something. In addition, the Golden Family has another sacred object, the Gala Gem seal, which is shaped like a seal. The seal is the double azure dragon game Fire Pearl, which seems to have been lost. "You are indeed Master Ching. Your knowledge is amazing." Shigambala looked at the box and said, "I bought the item in this box from an antique merchant. It's a scroll written in ancient Persian. After reading it, it mentioned a strange stone. It looks like a sacred item of my tribe. It is said that this object was found in an ancient tomb, but you went there, right? Then you came back with heavy casualties," Master Ching suddenly said. Shigambala nodded. "That's right. In the cemetery, my people encountered many strange things. In the end, none of them survived. The electronic device didn't even detect anything. It only left a message from Eagle in the last call for help. Later, I sent 3 groups of people there, but none of them came back. You want me to help you get the sacred object from this ancient tomb? Although I can't be sure whether the sacred object is in the ancient tomb, I guess that even if it is not, there must be more clues about it." Shigambala nodded. "Yes, I do want to ask you to help me. I know that the people around you are all talented people. Maybe they can find a way. Of course, in this ancient tomb exploration, no matter if there is any harvest or not, I will not treat you badly." Without much consideration, Master Ching said calmly, "Leave the box. After 3 days, I will send someone to contact you. You can go back first." Shigambala was a little hesitant, but when he thought about how this Master Ching had done all kinds of unbelievable things since he mysteriously appeared on the grassland a few months ago, he finally gritted his teeth and made up his mind. "Then, I'll wait for Master Ching's news. I won't go far. I'll stay in a nearby town temporarily. See the guest out." Master Ching waved his hand. After Shigambala's team left, Mr. Du returned to Master Ching's tent. After looking at Miss Gong, he lowered his head in front of Master Ching and said, "My lord, are you really going to help Shigambala find the sacred object of the Golden Family?" Master Ching said slowly, "Kelowna, we can't go back in a short time, so we need more land. Otherwise, we can't settle those down monsters who came with us. This place is close to Kelowna, and the spiritual energy here is not bad. Although Shinryu of Kelowna blocked the spiritual energy from leaking out of Kelowna, I can still move some of it out. If we want to survive, we still need to rely on resources." "Yes." Mr. Du nodded. "Shigambala and the family behind him have a huge power in the grassland. If we can cooperate with him, it will make things easier for us." Master Ching said slowly, "Why is the administration of Kelowna growing stronger day by day? That's because it has a huge national machine behind it. This is something worth learning. Humans and demons don't have to be completely separated. If you still follow Lai Caixing's point of view, it might not be suitable for you to follow me in the future. No, since we chose to follow you, we will follow your wishes first." Master Ching sighed slowly. "Since I accepted the Heaven's Heart he left behind, I won't destroy what he wanted to do. You can rest assured. Miss Gong suddenly said, My lord, who are you going to send to explore the ancient tomb this time? Master Ching said, I plan to go myself. I'm more or less interested in the sacred object of the Golden Family. Also, after I calculated with the Xiantian divination, I found that this trip is a bit dangerous. I'm a bit worried about sending someone else. Miss Gong said, Then I'll go pack up and go with you. Master Ching shook his head and said, No, Du Lin can go with me this time. You stay here. I have other things for you to do. My lord, please tell me. You? When Master Ching was about to speak, he suddenly frowned, and his expression changed slightly. Mr. Du and Miss Gong didn't understand. Master Ching stood up without saying a word, then walked out of the tent and looked up at the sky. The weather on the grassland was unpredictable. At this time, the sky in the distance was covered with dark clouds, making the sky look gloomy. A sound like the wind and some kind of crying came from afar. It was faintly discernible and revealed a kind of sadness. However, all of this disappeared, and the sky on the grassland became clear again. It was the same for Kelowna, which was further away. What was that sound just now? It was really uncomfortable. Miss Gong frowned. Master Ching was mumbling at this time, and his fingers were forming hand gestures quickly. His expression became more and more serious. After a while, he stopped and frowned again. At this time, his eyes were golden. If one listened carefully, one could even hear the heart of Grandmaster Ching beating with a strange rhythm. My lord, did you see something? Mr. Du Lin asked in a low voice. Master Ching said seriously, The human race should be flourishing, and it should usher in an era of prosperity for the human race. However, I don't know why the dragon vein in Kelowna suddenly became active just now, and it completely messed up Kelowna's fate. Also, Master Ching muttered to himself, I vaguely felt that it was declining. However, there seemed to be a special mystery hidden in that decline. Now that it has returned to normal, I can't tell if it is good or bad. Perhaps something happened in Kelowna. Then, are we still going to the ancient tomb in Persia? Du Lin asked quickly. Master Ching suddenly said, Let's go. If we can find the holy item of the Golden Family, it will be very useful to me. Now that Kelowna's fate is uncertain, this holy item will be more useful than I thought. Is this holy item of the Golden Family really that important? Miss Gong didn't understand. Master Ching said, It is not only the holy item of the Golden Family, but also the holy item of the entire human race in Kelowna. You have to know that in the past, this was Kelowna's territory. The Great Khan was the ruler of a dynasty. One of the 12 dragon veins in Kelowna is hidden here. After imprinting Shinryu's hand on the parchment, it slowly disappeared. After a moment of dizziness, a wave of tiredness came, but after a few breaths, his body returned to normal. Long Shura thought to herself, maybe it's because I'm in the inhuman realm and can't replenish my energy. I still have more than half of my energy left. It can't be because I'm old. Miss Long, are you planning to go back now? Boss Luo asked when Shinryu of Kelowna was in a daze. What did you say? Long Shura was stunned. Boss Luo said patiently, Miss Long, are you planning to take Fafnir away now? Kelowna of Shinryu looked at Golden Dragon, who was still lying on the floor. Golden Dragon's eyes twitched, and then he sat up with a whoosh sound. At this moment, the true dragon of Godly Land blinked, and then, without thinking, he quickly punched Fafnir's head. So, before the Golden Dragon could even say a line to wake up, he lay back down again. Miss Long looked at the curious gazes around her and clenched her fists. Sorry, I don't know why, but I couldn't control myself. That's really... Boss Luo smiled at this moment, Miss Long's style. It's just that this guy is too annoying. I'm not an unreasonable person. Kelowna of Shinryu of Kelowna sounded a little anxious. Then his expression changed. He turned around and waved his hand, directly sucking the living room door open. Who's there? Outside the living room door, there was a girl in pajamas hugging a pillow. She was at a loss and looked at him with a frightened expression. This girl was the girl who fell into the Lost Rift with boss Luomina. Hashtag, 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 hashtag PS. The next chapter will be later. Chapter 1373. Send this batch of artworks to the farm for storage first. Baligan was directing his clansmen to pack and transport the last batch of intact objects. At this time, the castle had been completely cleaned up. Now, only a flat piece of land was left. For the vampires of this clan, instead of rebuilding the damaged castle, it was better to completely flatten it and then build a new one. It was more in line with their pursuit of art. Baligan. At this moment, a figure slowly descended from the night sky. When the huge bat wings folded and then disappeared, what appeared was a handsome face. The vampire Busby, whose beauty could be listed in the top 5 of the Tordo clan. Busby, you're finally back. Baligan smiled and said, It seems that in this short day, you seem to have experienced a lot of things. It was obvious that Busby had changed into new clothes. But if he needed to change clothes, it meant that the original clothes were not good or had been damaged. It was after noticing this that the acting Grand Duke asked this question. Indeed, I have encountered a lot of things. I was just about to report to you. Busby walked in front of Baligan. When I was in the crack, I encountered the active fangs. I don't know why, but the lost fangs stopped moving and a large area of thick fog appeared around it. It seemed to be protected by some kind of power, and I couldn't enter. Well, I see. Baligan nodded and didn't seem to care much about the things in the crack. Instead, he said, Since you were back, I can also leave this place temporarily. You want to go out? Busby frowned. Baligan said casually, I have made an appointment with a few old friends. I need to go to the modern world for some things. It's quite urgent, so I will leave the things here to you for the time being. Don't worry, the golden dragon won't come again. I know. Busby nodded. How long will it take for you to come back? I will come back when I'm done, Baligan said with a relaxed face. Is there anything else? No. Busby shook his head. Baligan smiled and walked to Busby's side, reaching out to adjust his collar. He lifted the collar of his shirt and glanced at it casually. Then, he swept it flat and swept it over Busby's shoulder. Everything was done in one go. Only then did Baligan slowly say, During my absence, if anyone comes looking for me, just say that I went out to search for the golden dragon. In any case, such a large castle has been destroyed, so they can't help but believe it. Who will come for you? Busby frowned again. I'm not sure. Baligan said calmly. Maybe they're friends, maybe they're enemies, but they probably won't make a move. If they do come, just treat them well. If they say they're leaving right away, don't stop them. I understand. The upper-class nobles are currently settling down in the farm. Tell them to behave. If you see any disobedient ones, you can kill one as you please. Busby was slightly shocked. Baligan had always taken a very gentle approach to managing the clan, but this time, did you hear that? He asked in a low voice. I heard you. Busby sighed and nodded. Okay, that's all for now. Baligan patted Busby's shoulder and smiled slightly. Finally, he reminded him, By the way, remember to eat on time. Don't starve yourself. Remember, you're the vampire. Busby couldn't help but be startled. But time didn't wait for him to carefully figure out the meaning of these words. Baligan had already left directly and silently disappeared from his sight. What was left was only a scepter. In the Torito clan, as the Grand Duke's token, Baligan had always been in charge of it. It was the basis for exercising the Grand Duke's authority. He silently looked at the scepter in his hand. No one knew what he was thinking. After a while, a group of clan vampires patrolled over. When they saw Busby, they immediately bowed. When they saw the scepter in Busby's hand, all of them were shocked. His Highness Baligan will be away for a while. I'll be in charge of the token for now. Busby glanced at the vampires. If there's anything, please tell us, Sir Busby. All the vampires replied in unison. As expected, he was the most trusted vassal of the Grand Duke. Now that Baligan had temporarily left, Busby taking over the token didn't surprise the vampires too much. Although there was a slight discrepancy in the rules, Prince Baligan had always been someone who didn't care about the rules. All the vampires were relieved. Busby thought for a while and gave the first order. Inform all the upper and middle nobles in the farm. From now on, Until the Grand Duke returns, all high-grade crops are banned. The daily diet will be changed to the regular pure-blood supply. This, all the vampires suddenly looked at each other. They couldn't answer. This would cause all the upper and middle nobles, especially the upper nobles, to be strongly dissatisfied. You just need to convey what I said. Busby said indifferently. If there's anything else, I'll deal with it. Don't ignore the token in my hand, gentlemen. How dare we? We'll convey it right away. After dismissing all the vampires, Busby put away the scepter. He directly spread his bat wings and flew toward the farm. Looking at the girl standing at the door, hugging a pillow and wearing loose clothes, Kelowna's Shinryu subconsciously opened his mouth. Who is this? Miss Mina. Boss Luo stood up at this time. It's so late. What's the matter? You are. Mina looked at Boss Luo in front of her and was startled. After a few you are, she opened her mouth wide. It's you. I changed back to my original clothes. Boss Luo chuckled and walked over. Did I scare you? The girl nodded first, then shook her head. She couldn't help but look at Luochio in front of her, as if she really wanted to distinguish whether the person in the crack was the same person as the one now. Why is there another one? Kelowna's Shinryu muttered at this time. The meaning was unclear. Sister Long, what do you mean there's another one? The little butterfly asked curiously. Kelowna's Shinryu directly stretched out his claws, grabbed a piece of cake, and stuffed it into the little butterfly's mouth. Don't talk. Didn't you say you can digest it? Just eat it. Whoa. Oh. The little butterfly who was happily eating the cake silently thanked the boss in her heart. After the girl was invited into the living room and sat down, the girl slowly said the reason for her visit. At this time, Kelowna's Shinryu and the little butterfly shrank to the side and looked back and forth with their eyes. So it's because you can't sleep because of nightmares, so you want to find Mr. Norman. Boss Luo listened to the girl's explanation and said, but Mr. Norman doesn't seem to be back yet. It's okay. I can wait here for brother. The girl quickly said, right, Milo-chan and this Maria, Miss Teresa, what happened to them? Miss Maid smiled at this time. Teresa seemed to be attacked by a vampire and sucked a lot of blood, so she fainted. As for the other one, he fainted because of an unfortunate incident. Again? Mina was confused. Why did he say again? Yes. Miss Maid covered her mouth and chuckled. Kelowna's Shinryu's eyes suddenly twitched. Then he suddenly thought of something and whispered in the ear of the little butterfly, don't trust this woman in the future. She's very bad. The girl Mina was still confused, but she seemed to be more concerned about another thing. Right? You're Miss Teresa? She was attacked by a noble master. Is it true? But isn't Miss Teresa also a noble master? This we don't know either. Miss Maid narrowed her eyes and then served a cup of flower tea to the girl. Right, at night here, can you walk around freely? You should be staying in the dormitory, right? The girl's hands paused slightly as she took the cup. Then she said with a natural expression, yes, because sometimes Mina would also come here to contribute to her brother. Brother also said that if I want to come here, I can come here at any time. But I have to come quietly. I can't let the dormitory supervisor find out. It seems that Mr. Norman really likes you, Miss Mina. Boss Luo smiled casually at this time. Yes, brother likes me the most. The girl said happily. Mina also likes brother the most. You have a good relationship. Boss Luo nodded. I think Mr. Norman should be back soon. Miss Mina, why don't you wait here for a while? But they? The girl looked suspiciously at the two strangers in the living room, Kelowna Shinryu and the little butterfly monster. But before Boss Luo responded, the girl suddenly said, I know. These two were also chosen by the noble master to be pampered tonight, right? In simple words, it seemed that Kelowna Shinryu and the little butterfly monster were her companions in the farm. Pampered? What nonsense are you talking about? Kelowna Shinryu's reaction was unusually fierce. He glared and said fiercely, Little girl, watch your mouth. Don't talk nonsense, or misfortune may befall you. This made the little butterfly demon very scared, but it didn't make the young girl afraid. Instead, she giggled and said in a sweet voice, This sister's character is very interesting. Is it a character that is very easy to be shy? Is it a character that says otherwise, but her body is very honest? But I don't think I've seen this sister before, and she seems to be a bit old. Will she taste good? The face of the true dragon of the divine land suddenly turned livid. After that, he returned to normal. He just said lightly, "Hey, profiteer, I'm going to tear this place down and kill this little girl. Do you have anything to say?" Boss Luo certainly had something to say. He looked at Longshaw and smiled, then looked at the girl and said unhurriedly, "Actually, she's a good person, not as bad as you said. And just like Mr. Normand specially chose you, different individuals have different tastes." Shinryu snorted and turned his face away. This profiteer was getting more and more presumptuous, but she understood that this girl was not as simple as she looked, or things were not as simple as they seemed. This profiteer seemed to be responding to the girl's words. She didn't know if she would spoil this profiteer's plan if she said more. Bah, what's the big deal if I spoil it? But, as the saying goes, those who eat from others have no right to speak. Anyway, she did get a lot of help today, so she should give this profiteer some face. Anyway, this profiteer was not a citizen of Kelowna, so he could do whatever he wanted. This shop was so powerful. The expenses must be very high, so he had to keep doing business to maintain it. It seemed to be very hard in her heart. She had many reasons to convince herself, and at the same time, she reached for the cup and drank some water. "That's true." The girl smiled sweetly and nodded, but then she suddenly said, "But if you want to change your taste, you're welcome to come to Mina anytime." With that, the girl slowly opened her clothes on her shoulders and tilted her head to one side, letting her neck relax completely. Then her face blushed. "I feel that if it's you, you'll be very gentle to Mina." Puff! Shinryu on Kelowna spat out a cloud of water from his mouth. Shinryu, who didn't really choke, widened his eyes and looked back and forth between Mina and Boss Luo. "Well, thank you for your invitation, Miss Mina." Boss Luo smiled. "Of course, if you really want to, I don't think I'll refuse. Where's your integrity? Profiteer, I didn't expect you to be this kind of person. You actually have the heart to do this to such a young girl. Last time when I turned into a child, it was also like this. It seemed like you also liked the young butterfly monster very much. Is it because you have some kind of weird fetish?" At this moment, Mina smiled sweetly again. Her smile was as beautiful as a flower, looking innocent and pure. "You're really bad. You actually returned the question to me." But Mina was just joking. Because Mina belongs to Big Brother, I won't offer myself to other nobles. Are you angry? Mina's character is actually a naughty girl. Of course not. Boss Luo smiled. It's my honor to see Miss Mina's naughty side. All right, since Mr. Norman hasn't come back yet, and Miss Mina seems to be more energetic, why don't we do something else? What do you think? Well, okay, the girl replied sweetly, then lightly sucked on her finger and said, "But what should we do? The second diary that we picked up before, do you want to continue reading it?" Boss Luo said casually, "I've already read it. I don't know if Miss Mina is interested in continuing to listen to the rest of the content." The girl kicked her feet, thought for a while, and said, "I don't want to think about it. The content of that diary is so boring." "Well, noble master, why don't we play a game?" "Game?" Boss Luo didn't feel it was a pity. He just asked curiously, "What kind of game?" The young girl's face was full of joy as she said, "Mina, I recently learned a very fun game. It's called King's Game. The more people, the more fun it is. Noble master, do you want to play this game together?" King, game. Boss Luo looked at the girl and seemed to have encountered something interesting, so he smiled and said, "Yes, we can play. I'll go and prepare the props." Miss Maid smiled and went to find the game props. "What's the King's Game?" At this time, the true dragon of the divine land quietly pulled the little butterfly monster to the side, almost touching her ear, and asked in a low voice. Brainiac Butterfly said, "It's a kind of interactive poker game. In the game, the king's orders are absolute, and the participants have to obey the king's orders unconditionally. The specific rules are, those are the rules. Sister Long, do you want to play?" However, the true dragon of the divine land did not seem to have heard him at all. He muttered softly, Order absolutely anything, anything. She swallowed her saliva. Hashtag, 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 hashtag PS. 126th. Chapter 1374. The King's Game. As the name suggested, the king's orders were absolute, and the players couldn't disobey. But when the king selected the numbers, he didn't know who was holding the numbers. It was a completely random game. But the specific rules of the game depended on the number of players and the rules set at that time. Excluding the golden dragon who was knocked out by Kelowna Shinryu again, and Teresa who lost a lot of blood, there were only 5 people in the living room who were participating in the game. The master and servant of the club, Kelowna Shinryu, and the little butterfly monster, and the girl Mina. The chances of becoming the king were equal, and everyone had a 20% chance. The rule was that the king could randomly select 1 to 2 numbers to carry out the order, although they couldn't confirm who was holding the numbers. But if the king chose 2 people to carry out the order, then among the remaining 4 players, there was a 50% chance that they could pick a specific person to carry out the order. Kelowna Shinryu, who wasn't very good at math, after the little butterfly monster's simple analysis, he saw more tricks and concluded the essence of this game. As long as they were lucky, everything would be over. Master Noble, before the game starts, we need to set some rules. This game is slightly different from the usual, the King's Game. At this time, the young girl, Mina, picked out the 4 colors of a 2, 3, 4, 5, and a king of spades from the cards that the servant girl had found. There were a total of 21 cards, and she casually shuffled them in her hands. Miss Mina, please go ahead. Boss Luo nodded with a smile. Mina slowly said, right now, Mina has a total of 21 cards in her hand. The rules of dealing cards are the same as in normal games. Whoever gets dealt the king, which represents the king, will naturally be the king. But I will only give out 20 cards each time. If the remaining card is the king of spades, then the cards won't be shuffled and dealt again. Instead, according to the order of the cards being dealt, the person with the last card will draw and automatically become the king. If it isn't the king of spades, then it will be the next card to be dealt. In other words, there will be a person with 5 cards at the beginning. 24 color cards? Miss Maid suddenly smiled and said, in this way, the numbers will be repeated. It is also possible that the same person has 4 numbers. In this case, the probability of carrying out the king's order is very high. Wrong. Unexpectedly, the girl smiled sweetly and said, the probability of carrying out the king's order may be as high as 100%. The little butterfly thought for a moment and said, there are 5 of us. If there are 20 cards, each of us can only hold 4 at most, right? But weren't there a total of 5 numbers from A to 5? How can it reach 100%? Kelowna's Shinryu didn't say anything. Instead, he secretly placed his hands under the table. Kindergarten's ultimate math skill, counting fingers. I can't count them all, because there are new rules to be added. The girl giggled and said, first, if there is a king after the 20 cards are dealt, the holder of the king's card can't show it immediately, because the next step is the second step. I call it Fate's Correction. Fate's Correction? Boss Luo asked curiously. It sounds interesting. What's the specific content? The girl said, after the king is born, according to the order of the cards being dealt, each family can designate another family to draw a card. Listen, in the process of drawing cards, according to the order of spades, hearts, clubs, diamonds, spades and hearts, clubs and diamonds, the card with the same numbers can be thrown out to eliminate them. Otherwise, they need to be kept. In addition, if you have cards that can be thrown out as a team at the beginning, you need to wait until the cards are officially drawn before you can throw them out. I see. Boss Luo thought for a moment and said, that's true. The execution rate may reach 100%. Miss Mina's way of playing, isn't she afraid of getting caught in her own trap? Miss Maid chuckled at this time. But if you're lucky, you can directly become a king. Then you won't have any cards in hand and will be in a completely safe situation. The little butterfly monster blinked at this time. Kelowna Shinryu. Can't count them all with my fingers. Wait a moment. But Kelowna Shinryu could still understand a little. You said that if the last card is the king, then it will automatically be held by one of the families. But in this case, Isn't the identity of the king exposed from the beginning? Won't this contradict with your so-called fate's correction? Nope. The girl giggled and said, even if I know that you have the king's card, I may not be able to draw it. Besides, isn't fate the same at the beginning? In the past, the person who succeeded the throne was also known by the people at the beginning. Then, there was a coup d'etat and the regime changed. Isn't that fate's correction? So, after hearing these rules, noble master, do you still want to play this game? What are the specific restrictions of the instructions? Boss Luo asked with a smile. And the content of the punishment. That's true. The girl smiled and said, if the requirements of the instructions are too excessive, then the original meaning of the game will be lost. After all, if the people who participate in the game can't feel the fun of the game and instead develop a mentality of disgust, then it's meaningless. Since it's a game that everyone participates in together, why don't we each set a restriction rule? But the last person to set the rule can't propose a rule like, all the above rules are canceled, or the previous rule is canceled, which will make the restrictions invalid. As for the punishment, I got it. The girl hurriedly ran out. Not long after, she ran back with a small bottle of liquid in her hand. This is a paint developed by a plant that grows in a very special place. Once it comes into contact with the skin, it won't be able to be washed clean even after half a month. As for punishment, the king will write at least 7 words on the punisher's face. Childish. Kelowna Shinryu snorted. Then, she felt inexplicably relieved. I see. This punishment is good. Boss Luo nodded. Then, 1 rule for each. It's relatively fair. In that case, let's confirm again. Does everyone want to participate in this game? Only after you decide to participate can you start to set the rules. And once you decide to participate, you're not allowed to quit. The girl slowly raised her hand and said softly, I'll participate. Seeing this, the boss and the servant girl smiled at each other and then slowly raised their hands. It's interesting. I'll play too. The little butterfly girl raised her hand without thinking. The last one left was Kelowna Shinryu. Under everyone's gazes, she felt extremely pressured, but in the end, she still raised her hand indifferently. Let's just consider it as killing time. Then, let's start to set the rules. 1 rule for each. I'll start first. The girl thought for a while and rolled her eyes. Rule 1. If the punisher can't complete the order or refuses to complete the order, they can choose to carry out the punishment, or take off a piece of clothing to offset the punishment. But it's only limited to underwear. Vulgar. Shinryu snorted. She counted the clothes on her body. Surprisingly, there were a lot. This way, Miss Mina seems to be at a disadvantage. The servant girl covered her mouth and laughed. This girl was only wearing a nightgown. What if all the clothes are taken off? That's true. The girl thought for a while and then looked at her own clothes. Then it's only limited to underwear. Miss Mina is really confident. Boss Luo smiled casually then. Rule 2. You're allowed to veto the order twice, but the 3rd time, you have to carry out the order no matter what, and you won't be punished. How about that? Okay. The girl nodded and smiled. You're so nice. You really know how to relieve the pressure of the participants. Boss Luo just smiled and didn't say anything. In this case, the servant girl smiled. Rule 3. There can't be any physical contact in the order. It's not so fun. It feels like it's less fun. The girl shook her head with a pitiful look, but the 3rd rule didn't seem to be refuted. So she said helplessly, since the 3rd rule is set, who will go first? Kelowna Shinryu glanced at the little butterfly girl. The little butterfly girl blinked her eyes and pointed at herself. Me first? Then, the 4th rule, no one is allowed to be angry, and keep smiling. She actually wasted a chance to make a rule. This brainless butterfly girl with big breasts. Did I say something wrong? Feeling Sister Long's sharp gaze, the little butterfly girl couldn't help but look at the servant girl and the boss for help. No, I think it's good. Boss Luo smiled. Anyway, the game is for fun. I agree. Kelowna Shinryu rolled her eyes. She still had to rely on herself. She quickly went through the 4 rules in her mind. Finally, she thought about it and slowly said, 5th, the command must only be completed within this living room. You're not allowed to use any means to cause the effect to exceed the boundaries of this living room. They looked at the Shinryu in surprise. Longshaw felt uncomfortable and frowned. What? Do you have a problem with that? No. The young girl, Mina, shook her head. Then, she said with a look of surprise on her face, in fact, I should say that these rules are too normal. In fact, they are a little unexpected. I thought this Annie's rule would be more. Forget it, that's it. Auntie, this little brat? Calm down. The great Kelowna Shinryu shouldn't argue with a little brat. It's not good for her status. Calm down. Thus, the rules and conditions were made. At this time, the girl began to pick up the cards and continue to shuffle them. Before we officially start, there are 2 additional points. The dealer has to be changed after every game. Secondly, you're not allowed to use your abilities to peek at the cards. After all, Mina isn't like a noble lord who has magical abilities. She's just an ordinary human. Of course, if noble lords want to use their abilities, Mina won't know. There's nothing she can do, so even if Mina is bullied, she can only accept it obediently. Don't worry, I will follow the rules. Boss Luo nodded, then looked at Kelowna Shinryu and said, Miss Long, you will also follow the rules. Fine. I don't want to play this kind of dirty trick with a little girl. Then please start. Boss Luo directly made an inviting gesture to the girl. Thus, before the cards were dealt, the girl smiled and said, So, do you want to cut the cards? No need. Boss Luo said casually. Kelowna Shinryu, who had just finished his words, folded his arms. The little butterfly monster looked at the cards in the girl's hand with expectation. Miss Maid calmly poured the freshly changed flower tea for everyone at the table. At this time, the girl skillfully shuffled the cards, then flicked her finger. A 3 of hearts popped out from the deck in her hand and put it in her mouth as a counting card. Why does she look so experienced? Kelowna Shinryu couldn't help but twitch his eyes. Suddenly, he said, Wait, I'll cut the cards. The girl smiled and didn't say anything, handing the cards in front of him. Kelowna Shinryu casually folded the cards and gave them back. The girl took the cards and counted according to the 3 of hearts. She started counting from herself, and the last one was the little butterfly monster sitting next to her. Miss Maid started to distribute the cards. The order was Miss Maid, Longshaw, Luo Dance, Mina, Luaccio. Wow! When the cards were in front of the little butterfly monster, she couldn't wait to grab them in her hand. Kelowna Shinryu leaned back slightly, squinting his eyes and turning his eyeballs to the right. The little butterfly monster slightly pouted, directly covering the first card on her chest. Sister Long, don't be shameless. Zhongshan Butterfly. Kelowna Shinryu rolled his eyes. Cards were distributed in front of the participants one by one. Not long after, the 20 cards were all dealt out. The young girl smiled and revealed the last card that had not been dealt out in front of everyone. Ace of Spades automatically fell into Kelowna Shinryu's deck. Mr. Shinryu's face naturally turned black. The first round. Mina, 3 of hearts, 3 of clubs, 4 spades, 5 of diamonds. Little butterfly monster, 2 of hearts, 2 of clubs, 2 of diamonds, 4 diamonds. Miss Maid, King of spades, 2 of spades, 5 of spades, A of clubs. Luaccio, A of hearts, 5 of hearts, 4 of clubs, 5 of clubs. Kelowna Shinryu, 3 of spades, 4 of hearts, A of diamonds, 3 of diamonds, A of spades, exposed card. Kelowna Shinryu held the 4 cards in front of his eyes. Then he casually placed the exposed card, A of spades, on the leftmost position. Come on, A of spades is here. The girl said, Well, let's start the fates correction. The first person to distribute cards will draw cards. The order of drawing cards is the order of the same row. First, Miss Maid. Seeing Miss Maid stretched out her hand without hesitation, Kelowna Shinryu nodded secretly. Come on, A of spades is here. Unexpectedly, Miss Maid just looked at her master and casually drew a card from Boss Luo's deck. Ah, my luck is good. I can eliminate a pair. She put the 5 of spades in her hand and the 5 of hearts from Boss Luo's hand into a pair, and then threw them out. TSK, you don't have A of hearts. Shinryu pursed his lips it was her turn to draw cards. Seeing that the profiteer and the scheming maid only had 3 cards left in their hands, the true dragon of the godly land, who had no intention of being charitable, simply grabbed a random card from the little butterfly monster's hand. 2 of hearts. 6 cards. Shinryu's face darkened. So it was Little Butterfly's turn. Little Butterfly looked at the 6 cards in Sister Long's hand, looked at the 3 cards in the hands of Boss Luo and Sister Yu Yi, and the 4 cards in Mina's hand. She bit her finger and looked at Kelowna Shinryu while stretching out her hand towards Boss Luo's deck. Little Butterfly lowered her head under Kelowna Shinryu's gaze and instantly drew a card from Boss Luo's deck. Then, she quickly threw out a 2 of diamonds and a 2 of clubs. Then, she looked at the new card and found that it was actually a 4 of clubs. She assembled the cards and threw them out. Little Butterfly's current cards. 0 hashtag 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 PS. The next chapter will be later. Chapter 1375. After the butterfly demon threw out 2 pairs of combo consecutively, the number of cards in her hand had changed to 0. This meant that before the game officially started, she was already in an absolutely safe position. Only Mina and Boss Luo hadn't drawn any cards. Kelowna Shinryu didn't need to use her fingers to determine the number of cards in everyone's hands. She already had 6 cards, and she didn't have the king card. She even had the ace of spades. At present, Mina, who hadn't drawn a card, still had 4 cards. Luo Chio, who also hadn't drawn a card, had 2 cards left because he had been drawn twice in a row. Miss May had 3 cards. Now it's my turn. The girl's eyes swept back and forth between the remaining 3 cards at this time, and then she chuckled. Actually, there are some tricks to playing this game. For example, in this case, I don't have the king card in my hand, and I have already won in advance. Then the king card is easier to lock. Sure enough, it's more advantageous to draw the aristocrat's card. For Boss Luo, who had 2 cards left, if one of them was the king card, then the probability of drawing it would become 50%. Of course, it was also possible that there wasn't any, and thus the Boss Luo would be in a very advantageous situation with only 1 card left. The girl was very likely to have 5 cards that couldn't be combined, which would increase her danger. Of course, this also required her to say that she didn't have the king card as a foundation at the beginning. If this was just a lie, then it would be another situation, the most advantageous situation for the girl. Perhaps the girl also had a card in her hand that could match the ace of spades. In this case, it seemed possible to eliminate 1 card by drawing the card in Kelowna Shinryu's hand. But obviously, the benefits were far less than drawing cards from Luochio's hand. Besides, even if the 2 cards in Boss Luo's hand didn't have the king card, the girl still had the possibility of drawing numbers that could match the cards in her deck. Another situation was that the girl had a card that could match Long Shuo's revealed card. But in order to ensure that the revealed card would be in Long Shuo's hands, she didn't want to draw it above. The little butterfly monster had already thrown away all the cards in her hand and was lying on Kelowna Shinryu's shoulder. Her chest pressed down as she looked at the cards in her sister Long's hand and made an analysis. Kelowna Shinryu, whose shoulders were getting heavier and heavier, couldn't help but tremble. She wanted to throw a tantrum, but she still had to maintain a smile. Rule number 4. Don't get angry, keep smiling. This lousy game, who invented it? I wonder what cards you have left. Seeing that the girl had already extended her hand towards the boss, the little butterfly monster looked on curiously. Noble master, I'm sorry. The girl smiled and looked at the card she drew, then said happily, my luck seems to be good. Then the girl threw out 2 cards, 5 of clubs, and 5 of diamonds. The girl's turn ended, and the number of cards she had was 3. Finally, it was Boss Luo's turn. There's only 1 left. Boss Luo looked at the cards in his hand and smiled. My luck is also good. I wonder if I can draw a matching card in the end. Then, the boss's targets were the girl, Miss Maid, and Kelowna Shinryu. Do you want to pick mine? Miss Maid looked at Boss Luo with a gentle smile at this time. Boss Luo smiled, well, I already have a target. I'll draw yours next time. Yeah, that's a pity. Miss Maid was still smiling. With such a smile, Boss Luo looked at Kelowna Shinryu. Miss Long, can you give me your leftmost card? My card. This profiteer actually knew Kelowna Shinryu tilted his head as if he couldn't bear the boss's gaze. Humph. What? Do you think I'm a sore loser? I don't care about this kind of cheap charity. Of course not. Boss Luo smiled. I really want this card in your hand. If you want it, then take it. Shinryu put the leftmost card on the table and pushed it towards Boss Luo. Boss Luo took the card and glanced at it. Then he smiled and threw out the 2 cards in his hand. I have no more cards in my hand. Thank you, Miss Long. Damn profiteer. Kelowna Shinryu didn't know what to feel at this moment. His legs stopped shaking, as if he was dumbfounded. The first round, Destiny's Correction, ended. Mina, 3 of hearts, 3 of clubs, 4 of spades. 3 cards. Little butterfly monster. 0 cards. Miss Maid, King of spades, 2 of spades, A of clubs. 3 cards. Luochio, 0 cards. Kelowna Shinryu, 3 of spades, 4 of hearts, A of diamonds, 3 of diamonds. 4 cards. Miss Maid played the king card in her hand, the king of spades. First round, I'm the king. How? Kelowna Shinryu shuddered. Miss Maid congratulated it this time, then laughed. But this aristocrat can only choose 2 numbers from 1 to 2. If 2 numbers are held by the same person, the other number is also safe. 2 numbers are in my hand. What do you mean? Kelowna Shinryu frowned. Miss Maid said naturally, Of course, I have to complete 2 orders. Isn't it exciting? Andy, are you not going to play? Huh. Kelowna Shinryu shrugged, looking relaxed. Then let's start, Your Majesty. Miss Maid's eyes swept back and forth between the girl and the true dragon. Then she smiled and said, At present, in addition to this king card, there are still 2, 3, and 4 of spades, 3 and 4 of hearts, 3 and 4 of clubs, and 3 of diamonds. These 9 cards are suddenly a little difficult to choose. Wait, you. Kelowna Shinryu opened his mouth, then closed it. This scheming Maid actually remembered the cards. What's wrong, Miss Long? Miss Maid asked softly. I said, Hurry up if you want to give orders. Don't dilly-dally. Miss Maid chuckled, then slowly said, Then the first one I choose is hearts. Miss Maid was still innocent, but Kelowna Shinryu was expressionless. This little trick obviously wouldn't work to make her nervous and reveal her true identity. Miss Maid couldn't help but think. This scheming maid only had this little trick. Unexpectedly, there was a little butterfly monster behind Kelowna Shinryu. When Miss Maid said the 2 words of hearts, the little butterfly monster's expression immediately tightened. 3. Miss Maid's voice fell. Miss Mina was still smiling. Kelowna Shinryu was still expressionless. The little butterfly monster's expression relaxed. Immediately, Miss Maid said quickly, and 4 of hearts. Hearing this, Kelowna Shinryu was stunned at first, then looked at her own cards. Suddenly, she turned her head and looked at the little butterfly monster behind her. She looked at the little butterfly monster's expression, which meant that she was a traitor, and she felt uncomfortable. You forget it. Long Shirua sighed. From the next round, stay away from me. So the little butterfly monster, who was sweating profusely, quickly nodded her head like a chick pecking at rice. Miss Maid began to exercise the power of a king. 3 of hearts. Please say the name of your second favorite person. Miss Maid narrowed her eyes. 4 of hearts. Let's have a dance performance. Of course, because of the second rule, you can also be exempted from this order. My second favorite is my brother, Miss Mina said without thinking. My first favorite is also my brother. Third, fourth, fifth, all of them. My favorite is still my brother. Obviously, she didn't intend to use her immunity. Brother? Boss Luo suddenly said. The girl nodded. Yes, brother. Boss Luo smiled and didn't say anything. At this moment. Oh, Miss Long is 4 of hearts. I didn't expect it. Miss Maid looked at her with surprise. If the order is too difficult, so annoying. But she had to keep smiling. The 4th rule. Dance, right? Kelowna Shinryu stood up expressionlessly, glancing at the crowd. Look carefully. She didn't look at anyone else, just slowly walked to the carpet in the living room and took off her shoes. Then she gently kicked the golden dragon lying on the ground to the corner of the wall. She closed her eyes and breathed gently. Her body seemed to be completely relaxed. A strange feeling slowly spread out from Kelowna Shinryu's body. She was still in the living room, but she felt like she saw the clear wind, the bright moon, and the orchid in the empty valley. Vaguely, she seemed to see a younger version of Kelowna Shinryu. She was weak, like a willow, standing on the top of the mountain, with the clouds as her companion. The clear wind was making her happy. Her hands began to float slowly, and when she opened her eyes, she seemed to have a spiritual light, and the space became quiet and gentle. It was difficult to connect her with the true dragon of the divine land who possessed the strongest power in the present world. She was more like a budding girl, dancing lightly and gracefully. She seemed to see the ficus leaves draped over her body. She seemed to see the red leopard swimming under her body. She seemed to see the fox in the mountain being chased and the rain falling from the sky. Sister Long, so beautiful. The little butterfly rubbed her eyes as if she saw a dream. This was the side of Kelowna Shinryu that she had never seen before. She didn't even dare to speak, fearing that if she spoke louder, this dreamlike scene would be popped like a bubble. Boss Luo couldn't help but recall the description in a poet's work. Juga Mountain Ghost. The rest of the secluded Huang Huang will never see the sky. The road is dangerous and difficult. Only one comes. Standing alone on the Shi Mountain, the clouds are raging, and below, dark and misty, the day is dark. The east wind is drifting with the rain of the gods. Looking at it, Luochio seemed to want to reach out to grab something. Finally, he slowly put down his hand. Unconsciously, when Long Shua stopped her movement, it seemed that everyone's time was still stuck in the dance. Kelowna Shinryu heaved a sigh of relief, silently putting on his shoes and returning to his original position. He glanced at the silent crowd and glared at them. The budding girl who danced on the top of the mountain seemed to be a fleeting fantasy. At this moment, Kelowna Shinryu was still the same as before. He said impatiently, "Are you all dumbfounded?" "No." The little butterfly monster turned around, then hugged Kelowna Shinryu's arm, raising his head. "Sister Long, you're so awesome. I didn't know that before." "Go away." Kelowna Shinryu pushed her away with a disgusted look. "I don't talk to traitors. How can you do this?" The little butterfly monster muttered with an aggrieved face. The true dragon of the godly land directly crossed his legs and rested his chin on his hands. He subconsciously wanted to light a cigarette, but in the end, he didn't light it up. It was as if the words "strangers do not come" were written on his face. I didn't expect Miss Long to have such exquisite dancing skills. Mississippi Maid rarely looked at Kelowna Shinryu, smiling softly. "My impression of Miss Long has changed." "Tut, thank you." The true dragon of the godly land still had a disgusted look on her face. She curled her lips and glanced at Boss Luo. "Miss Long, this doesn't seem to be an ordinary dance." Boss Luo said softly, "Is there anything special?" Long Shaw tilted her head and looked at the courtyard outside the window. "Nothing, it's just a sacrificial dance used by the ancients to worship the mountain god." "What's the fuss?" "Oh, I see." Boss Luo nodded. "No wonder." Kelowna Shinryu looked back. "No wonder what?" Luochio said softly. "No wonder it's so beautiful. I think, even if it was the mountain god, if he could see such a dance, he would be very happy, right? I really want to see Miss Long wearing a sacrificial costume and dancing on the top of the mountain. It should be more unforgettable." Thump, 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 thump. The sound of heartbeats. A purple phoenix coronet robe quietly flashed in Kelowna Shinryu's mind. Kelowna Shinryu suddenly quivered, then stretched out his hand and knocked on the table. "Do you still want to play?" "What are you waiting for?" "I'm still waiting for revenge." "Who's the next player to deal?" "According to the order, it should be me." Boss Luo smiled, then put away the cards on the table and shuffled them. "Does anyone want to cut the cards?" After shuffling the cards, Boss Luo asked directly. This time, Kelowna Shinryu didn't ask to cut the cards, neither did the others. So Luochio directly distributed the cards in his hand. The second round started. Mina Girl, 5 of hearts, 8 of clubs, 5 of clubs, 5 of diamonds, 3 of clubs, face card, Butterfly Monster, A of spades, A of hearts, 2 of hearts, 8 of diamonds mismade, 2 of spades, 4 of hearts, 2 of clubs for Club Luochio, 3 of spades, 3 of hearts, 2 of diamonds, 3 of diamonds. Long Shua, 4 of spades, 5 of spades, 4 diamonds. King of spades. At this time, Kelowna Shinryu glanced at the cards in his hand. Kelowna Shinryu had already played 1 round, so he completely understood the rules and patterns of the game. The king card was in his hand. Shinryu had the face card, so how could he lose? Hashtag, 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 PS1. 2/26. Chapter 1376. What Hui Yao did not expect was that he would be able to find a student on this day. After leaving the token to Elizabeth, he believed that this little vampire girl would come to the association to look for him soon. Of course, it would be safer to bring her away. However, he never forced her to do anything. Giving her the token and letting her find it later was actually to give this little vampire girl more time to think. It was not because of the situation, but because she had made up her mind. This way, even if they were destined to be master and disciple, she would not have anything to complain about in the future. As for the question of whether it was appropriate for the first Tower Master of the Magician Association to accept a vampire as his student, of course, it was appropriate. Even the Grand Dukes of the 13 clans could not question the identity of the first Tower Master. Perhaps the Grand Duke of the clan that Elizabeth belonged to would be quite happy. Thinking of the 13 Grand Dukes of the clan, Hui Yao suddenly became a little concerned. Now, he should meet up with Shinryu from Kelowna, bring the Golden Dragon back, and then return to the association. However, the Golden Dragon was currently under the watch of Shinryu. The Tower Master of Hui Yao did not think that Fafnir would be in any danger. Even if there was, he was afraid that it would be Shinryu who would do it. As for the association, Yaris had been locked in the 0-degree hell. As for the Michael Club, judging from the departure of the 7 chiefs, it seemed that they would not appear again in a short time. Time seemed to have become less pressing. Perhaps he should secretly go to the farm to see the person under the tree again. Although he had gotten rid of Baligan, he would pay more attention to him. With this thought in mind, Hui Yao subconsciously glanced at the lost crack that connected all the 13 clans in the Inhuman territory. In the end, he chose to quietly land in the crack. This lost crack had existed for a long time. When he discovered the predecessor of the Inhuman territory, the destroyed Greek god's kingdom, the crack had already existed. According to several investigations, this crack did not seem to have existed for a long time. He had once researched the history of the Greek gods. From the description of the last record, there should still be some creatures in the Greek god's kingdom. Some of them were mythical magic beasts and the descendants of the Greek gods. It was just that when he first discovered this destroyed kingdom, he didn't encounter any demigods other than a few dangerous demonic beasts that survived in some dangerous places. There seemed to be a blank period in between. It seemed to be the time when the Lost Rift was formed. At that time, the Greek divine kingdom was on the brink of collapse. Many places had been eroded by the void. He even encountered a very strange creature in a place where the erosion was serious. It seemed to be born with the void and would devour all living things. There were a lot of those creatures, and they had a very high resistance to magic, but they couldn't go too far away from the erosion area. Hui Yao cut off all the eroded areas and let them be completely devoured by the void. Only then could he successfully expel these strange and terrifying creatures from the Annihilation Kingdom. As for the Inhuman Domain stabilization system, he had picked up the core of the divine kingdom of the Greek gods, analyzed it, and repaired it. Of course, he could not complete all the repairs, but he could barely activate it and run some basic functions. That was how the current Inhuman Domain came to be. However, the interior of the Lost Rift was one of the few places in the entire Inhuman Domain that the new system could not cover. He did not know when it started, but the 13 clans suddenly paid more attention to the Lost Rift. Even the legend had overlapped with the origin of the 13 clans without any warning. Overlapped. When Hui Yao finally stood on top of the Lost Rift and looked at the area covered by thick fog in front of him, he could not help but be stunned. Why did he suddenly have the idea that the legend was overlapped? Also, he had indeed secretly explored the Lost Crack, but in his impression, there didn't seem to be such a strange area of thick fog below the Chorito clan before this. He even accepted the existence of the Lost Fong as a matter of course. He even reasonably thought that the origin of the 13 clans, the first vampire, should be buried here. However, now that he thought about it carefully, the vampire clan of the 13 clans, the existence called Cain, should be based on the Holy Scripture. However, even the Holy Scripture, it only described Cain as the perpetrator of violence. He was not the ancestor of the clan in the legends. What's wrong with this? Hui Yao could not help but feel an indescribable uneasiness. He shook his head hard, and his spirit suddenly became abnormally tired. At the same time, countless messy and disorderly information began to appear in his mind. Countless formulas, words, and even more totems with unknown meanings. Oh no, this is Yari's. Hui Yao did not have time to think about it. He immediately sat down with his legs crossed and began to meditate. He knew that this was because he had endured Yari's mental attack in the core space and absorbed too much information. He had already compressed all the messy information. However, he did not expect that it was just a strange idea of overlapping. It was like a fuse that ignited all the information again in an instant. The knowledge of more than a few different worlds began to impact his understanding of the original world. The different knowledge was also subverting his understanding and cognition of magic and his definition. Definition: 1 + 1 is equal to 2. If this was his most basic understanding of magic, then all the tactics of magic should be based on this. If this definition became 1 + 1 is equal to 3, or a number other than 2, then all his tactics based on 2 as the basis would be completely overturned. Once it was overturned, then he would lose the power of magic. There were no enemies. Even the inhuman domain had returned to a relatively safe state. However, the first Tower Master of the Association had fallen into the most terrifying crisis in his life. Moreover, there was no help here. Meditation could not produce an effective effect in this kind of explosion of information. The first Tower Master suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood and directly fainted on the ground. He did not know when, but a small opening suddenly appeared in the thick fog in front of him. After that, a few small, vengeful spirits floated out of the opening. They seemed to be playing around. Then, a small, vengeful spirit seemed to have discovered something and slowly approached. It looked at the unconscious, white-robed young man and seemed to be thinking about something. Hui Yao, this damn brat. What the hell is he doing? Why isn't he here yet? Shinryu from Kelowna could not help but think of the Tower Master of the Association, who had a teacher-student relationship with her. Then, under the reminder of the little butterfly demon, her heart suddenly thumped. Even her hands began to tremble a little. Sister Long, whose card are you going to draw this time? Don't be noisy. I'm thinking. Shinryu from Kelowna glared fiercely at this time. Her hands were trembling a little. She could not help but ask herself what was going on. In the bright living room, the scene was like this. The young girl, Mina, was still wearing her nightgown, but next to her was a folded undergarment. That's right, Mina had already used up her immunity twice and chose to take off her clothes to cancel out the execution of the command once. But God knows why she took off her undergarment first. Boss Luo just took off his coat and played a game of staring at the little butterfly demon without blinking for a minute. Miss Maid was unharmed and was in a safe state all the time. The number of times he became the king made people's hair stand on end. Luo Dance could not take off her underwear anymore. At this time, she could only cover her chest with her hand. Obviously, she couldn't block it, but she still had a bright smile on her face. Because she couldn't escape anymore, and her immunity had been used up. If she was ordered to carry out the order again, she could only choose to write words on her face with paint that couldn't be erased for half a month, or carry out the order. Similarly, Shinryu from Kelowna could only cover her chest with her hands. But different from the little butterfly demon's white face, Shinryu's face was not intact anymore. For example, what have you done all these years? Why are you still single? You have been working very hard. Are all the good men dead? Don't look at my face, please. I'm also desperate, but what can I do? Can't win, can't win, can't win. It was written by Miss Maid, but because it was written in a flowery font, it didn't look like a cat with a dirty face. Even when she looked at it for a few more times, it seemed to have a unique beauty. Long Shiro thought it must be her illusion. Her hands were still trembling. So what happened? Long Shiro couldn't help but recall. The second round started with King. She thought she could avenge the previous shame, but she didn't expect that her king would be taken away in the first round. She didn't know what was wrong. Since then, it seemed that luck didn't recognize the Shinryu from Kelowna and gradually drifted away. At the end of each round, she would become one of the people who would be ordered to do many strange things. Miss Long, your dance was so beautiful. I didn't see it clearly just now. Can you please dance again? But have you heard of the art of ***? Everyone's shoulders look tired. Miss Long, can you give everyone a massage? Please answer. Do Shinryu have physiological needs? Oh, it's Miss Long again. I'm embarrassed. What is the requirement to become a Shinryu? Why is it Miss Long again? It seems that I can't take off my clothes anymore. How difficult. Then, let's make it simpler this time. Can I do 3 backflips in slow motion? It's still too difficult. If you want to choose punishment, that's fine. Please answer. If you love someone, you're willing to sacrifice everything from your body to your soul. Miss Long, why don't you tell everyone a joke this time? It's okay if it's not funny. Oh, Miss Long. All right, what's your method of delivery? Who am I? Where am I? What am I doing? After the philosophy triple combo, reality was still reality. Looking at the 4 cards in his hand, the numbers from 2 to 5 had all been gathered. According to the luck he had along the way, it was conceivable that the possibility of drawing an A would be infinite. Wait, the true dragon of China was now staring at the deck of cards that had been thrown out on the table. An A has already been thrown out. She looked around. She couldn't see anything from the scheming maid's face. This scheming maid's disguise was really foul. Pass. It turned out that all the previous games were because she had inexplicably competed with this scheming maid. That was why she had lost so miserably. Profiteer. His luck was always good. Although he didn't become once, the number of times he was ordered to do something was very few. Currently, Profiteer still had 3 cards in his hand, but it was hard to see anything from his expression. Besides, with her current appearance, she couldn't make herself look at Profiteer's expression for more than a second. She always felt that the moment their eyes met, her current ugly appearance. Pass. Who am I? Where am I? What am I doing? Calm down, Long Shiro. You can do it. After so many failures, you have learned enough experience. She took a deep breath. Currently, the only face card was in the hand of Mina. But it was a pity that she didn't need it. And the girl also had 4 cards in her hand, so the chances of drawing the king card were too few. Only Luo Dance was left. Holding only 1 card in her hand, she was looking at everyone nervously. Nervous? Why was she nervous? 1 card was relatively safe. After this round, the king card would appear and start to give instructions. Obviously, this Zhongshan butterfly didn't care about the strange instructions at all. Why was she nervous? So, the king card. Kelowna's Shinryu suddenly stared at Luo Dance, who was beside her. The little butterfly subconsciously swallowed her saliva at this time. It was so easy to see through. Seeing the little butterfly's appearance at this moment, Kelowna's Shinryu suddenly felt enlightened. Why? Why did she ignore this key to winning? Obviously, she had been defeated so many times by that scheming maid with this stupid butterfly. Obviously, this was the easiest one to see through. Looking at the little butterfly who was still nervous, Kelowna's Shinryu suddenly felt that she suddenly became cute. Luo Dance's figure was infinitely enlarged in front of her eyes, just like an angel opening her chest. Dance, her heart had been moved to call the name of this simple and hardworking little girl who had been admitted to the hospital since some time ago. Kelowna's Shinryu felt like she had seen the world of immortals. She boarded the colorful cloud and threw herself into the great chest. She stretched out her hand, as if to pick the fresh fruit of hope. She held in her hand. She opened it. 5 of spades. Kelowna's Shinryu's face was full of disbelief, and his voice trembled. You? How could you? How could it be? Why are you so nervous if it's not the king card? The little butterfly didn't mind being in front of others at this time. Hurriedly said, "Can you hurry up this time? I want to go to the washroom." I drank too much honey tea just now. Well, okay, after going back, he could throw this Zhongshan butterfly out of the house. Don't want it. Throw it away. Throw it away. Throw it away. Ah, it's the king card this time. Miss Maid turned over the king of spades, card with surprise, and then her eyes began to sweep back and forth among the crowd. Then, those who have 3 of diamonds and 2 of hearts, please stand up first. Boss Luo smiled, then stood up and turned over a 2 of hearts card. Seeing Boss Luo stand up this time, Miss Maid couldn't help but blink her eyes. The use of abilities was prohibited in the game. Her master didn't use them, so she naturally wouldn't use them. Therefore, every time the king card was called, the number of cards had to be calculated and considered. She couldn't use abilities, but memory and analytical ability were certainly not prohibited. But this time, she unintentionally called out her master, which was really quite unexpected. Considering the probability, Miss Maid suddenly smiled mysteriously. At the same time, Kelowna's Shinryu turned over the 3 of diamonds card with a pale face and stood up shyly, one hand in front of his chest, the other hand under his abdomen, slightly lowering his head. I don't want to play anymore. I'll kill everyone here. I'll kill them all. It seems that I can't defeat them? Who am I? Where am I? What am I doing? Boss Luo smiled very casually. There are times when you're unlucky. What's the command this time, Your Majesty, Queen? Let me think. Miss Maid chuckled, then stood up and walked towards Kelowna's Shinryu. She walked back and forth behind her, which made Kelowna's Shinryu stand up with a lot of chills. She bit her lips and said, Hurry up if you want to give the command. Don't dawdle. I'll ask you to write something else. It seems that I can't write anymore. Mississippi Long, Miss Maid shouted at this time, and suddenly stuck to Shinryu's back, whispering something in her ear. I don't know if my master likes women with short hair and no leg hair. No one could hear what she said, at least if they didn't use their abilities to listen. What did you say? Kelowna's Shinryu turned back with astonishment. But Miss Maid had already walked away and chuckled. This time Mississippi Long has completed the command. That's great. You. Kelowna's Shinryu frowned subconsciously. What trick is this scheming maid playing? That profiteer likes short hair and no leg hair. What does it have to do with me? Miss Maid immediately walked to Boss Luo and whispered with a smile, Please don't move for 3 seconds. Boss Luo blinked and nodded. Miss Maid stood on tiptoe and lightly kissed Boss Luo's lips. 3 seconds was enough to shock everyone. The little butterfly monster opened her mouth and then covered it with her hands. Mina furrowed her brows. Kelowna's Shinryu's eyes widened. Kissed, kissed, kissed? Just like that? Why was she so skillful? She had kissed so many times. Did she always do this? Kiss. 3 seconds later, Miss Maid looked into Boss Luo's eyes and said softly, You're right. You did complete the order, Boss Luo asked curiously. Didn't you say that we can't touch each other's bodies? I couldn't help it. Miss Maid chuckled. Then I'll punish myself. After all, my clothes are still there, and I haven't used my immunity, so I could be capricious for a while. With this, Miss Maid stepped back and slowly took off her coat. Then something fell from her body. It was a handbook made of animal skin tied with a butterfly knot on a handkerchief. Miss Maid picked up the letter and put it aside casually. Then she looked at everyone and said, Well, let's continue to play the game. Who's going to deal next? Mina suddenly said, Didn't she say she wanted to go to the washroom? How about pausing for a while? It's impolite to ask a girl to be patient. You're right. Miss Maid nodded with a smile. Then she took off her coat and walked to Butterfly Monster, putting it on her. Miss Pinshin, I'll go with you. I also need to touch up my makeup. Okay. Watching the two of them walk out of the living room, and then looking at the silent auntie, who seemed to be autistic, the young girl Mina stood up at this time, stretched her waist, and said with a smile, Well, then let's take a break. Intentionally or unintentionally, her gaze swept over the handwritten animal skin letter that was placed on the table. Chapter 1377. There was not only a gorgeous bathroom in the villa, but also a luxurious washroom. From the gap under the toilet door, he could see her slightly open calves and the pink clothes that had retreated to her ankles. The little butterfly sitting on the toilet opened her mouth slightly, revealing a comfortable expression. "Miss Dance, did you have a good time today?" Hearing the voice of Miss Maid outside the door, the little butterfly monster was stunned and then said happily, very happy, "Everyone is together. Miss Dance, it seems that you really like being together. Because, isn't it better if we are together?" She thought for a while and replied. She stood up and leaned forward slightly, putting on the only clothes on her body. Whoosh! Then she opened the door and walked out naturally. Because they were all girls, it seemed that there was nothing to care about. Miss Servant Girl just stood quietly at the washstand. It seemed that she didn't do anything to touch up her makeup. She was holding a set of clothes in her hand. "Sister Yuyi, are you going to change clothes?" The little butterfly monster couldn't help but ask curiously. The servant girl smiled and said, "This is for you to wear." "For me? But—" Miss Maid held the clothes and walked to Luo Dance. She began to put on the underwear for her. At the beginning, there was no instruction that you can't put on the clothes halfway. "Oh." The little butterfly monster was stunned, then patted her forehead. It seems to be true. There was indeed no instruction in this respect. But because of her habitual thinking, she didn't think carefully in this direction. The underwear was put on quickly. Miss Maid's hands gently held the little butterfly's chest, as if making the final adjustment. Suddenly said, "It seems that you are a little bigger than last time." She blushed and said embarrassedly, "I don't know why." Miss Maid didn't continue this topic, just put on the underwear for her and tidied it carefully. She suddenly asked, "Miss Dance, are you interested in staying in our hotel?" "Well?" The little butterfly monster suddenly raised her head and looked into the servant girl's eyes. She asked subconsciously, Stay at your place?" Miss Maid nodded with a smile and said softly, "Yes, because it's usually very empty and busy. I thought it would be nice if there was someone who could help me. Besides, I can always be with my master." She was with Boss. The little butterfly couldn't help but reveal a longing expression. "Do you want to come?" Miss Maid asked again. Luo Dance thought for a while and shook her head. "No need. Actually, I'm fine with Sister Long. Besides, if I leave, there will be no one to help in the hospital. Sister Long doesn't usually clean, and sometimes the pharmacy will be a mess. Also, she often eats junk food. Although it doesn't affect her body, I always feel bad." "Is that all?" The servant girl couldn't help but smile. "If it's just these, it's actually very easy to solve. In exchange, I can arrange a very good servant for Miss Long," Luo Dance said. "Actually, I always feel that if I leave, Sister Long will be alone and will be very lonely. So, although I really want to go to Sister Ye's place, I see." The servant girl hugged her gently. "You're such a good child. If you can always have such a considerate heart, I think my master will like you even more." She revealed an intoxicated expression and murmured, "Big sister, the smell on your body is so fragrant." Miss Maid's voice was lower. "If you think it through, you can come to me at any time. Today's invitation will always be valid." She always felt that she really wanted to say yes like this. She closed her eyes, thinking that it would be nice if she could fall asleep at this time. Staying with Boss? Long Shura sat alone on the sofa because of the intermission. She didn't know when that girl, Mina, was gone. Anyway, she didn't care too much. At this time, Kelowna's Shinryu was looking at the courtyard, seeming to be lost in thought. Then, she felt something covering her body. She couldn't help but be startled, and then shivered. Her first instinct was, why was she suddenly approached? But seeing that it was her original clothes, she raised her head in astonishment. She saw the profiteer who always disturbed her thoughts. "I don't know how to say thank you." Kelowna's Shinryu's tone was not very friendly. Boss Luo said casually, "Don't worry about it. Although it's a game, there's no rule saying that you can't wear clothes before. At this time, I think you should also wear clothes for Miss Pinshin at this time." Kelowna's Shinryu was stunned, and then opened her mouth wide. How could this be? Boss Luo couldn't help but laugh. Kelowna's Shinryu couldn't help but roll her eyes, and said with annoyance, "Is it that funny?" Luochio shook his head, and said softly, "I just feel that Miss Long is a very upright person. She follows the rules more than anyone else. Although she is always in a losing state, She has been restraining herself from using any ability. She even didn't use her extraordinary judgment or memory. She is simply playing this game as an ordinary person. Shinryu snorted unhappily. Aren't you the same? Boss Luo blinked. Miss Long didn't notice it. What did she notice? Boss Luo smiled. All the cards were marked by Yu Yi. She prepared the cards, and on each card, there were different scents of perfume. So from the beginning, all the cards were under her control. F***CK. Kelowna's Shinryu's forehead twitched. This scheming girl, so evil. I knew it. Kelowna's Shinryu couldn't help trembling slightly. She was on the verge of going crazy. But even so, Miss Long has been enduring and following the rules. Boss Luo smiled. Although it seems silly, I can't help but like her kindness from the bottom of my heart. Pung pung. It was slightly hot. She couldn't help but take a deep breath, and then looked straight into Luochio's eyes. Are you always like this? Always. Always inexplicably good to others. Boss Luo sat down slowly and imitated her to look out of the window. He didn't say anything, as if he was thinking about something. Kelowna's Shinryu frowned, looking at his side profile. It seemed that this was also the first time she had looked at his side profile at such a close distance. When was the first time she had met him? As if it had been a long time. Actually, Luochio lowered his head to look at his hands. Actually, not long ago, I didn't even know how to get in touch with others, or rather, I lost the ability to get in touch with others. I just trapped myself in a very small world. Later, after I learned how to talk with others, I started to think that if I treat others better, others would treat me better. Long Shiro opened her mouth. Why did you suddenly say this? In response to Miss Long's question, Boss Luo turned back to look at her eyes. Miss Long should understand the nature of my job. I can't help but want to get close to you. Even this time, it's the same. Without a doubt, I want to get you. Get? Her heart thumped twice, and then her eyes widened a little. At the same time, she felt her heart was suffocating. She couldn't help saying, with a complicated expression, Get my soul? Don't give an affirmative answer. Don't. Although she should have known this from the beginning, she just didn't want to think this way. Don't give an affirmative answer. Yes. It's an affirmative answer. Hold it in. Shinryu's eyes instantly dimmed, and then he slowly said in a tough or weak voice, Finally, you go to reveal your foxtail? Boss Luo said frankly, Every time I see it, every time I get close to it, I want to hold it up with my own hands. It's really beautiful, as if it can bring me colors that will never fade. Miss Long, do you know about red and green color blindness? She turned her head, pursed her lips, and said, Who doesn't know? When they were special glasses, when colors returned to normal for the first time in front of them, Luochio was still looking at her, is the moment I saw you. Thank you so much. Long Shiro felt even more suffocated. Such high praise. So, sometimes I choose to leave. Boss Luo looked out of the window again, because I always feel that one day there will be a time when I can't completely control this impulse. She felt that he was looking at a place far away, a place very far away, looking at something else. Why are you telling me these things? Luochio thought for a while and said, I think, if Miss Long knows my thoughts better, then maybe you won't be too troubled by some of my words and actions. I just have some motives. She looked at him, and he looked at her. Her lips moved slightly, and a tear rolled down from the corner of her right eye. She didn't know what to do. In the end, she couldn't hold it back. It hurts. It's the first time I felt such pain. Don't you think it's cruel, these words? She took a deep breath and looked away. Like this. Luochio took out a handkerchief and handed it to her. Kelowna's Shinryu suddenly swatted it. I don't need a hypocrite like you. Anyway, you just want to get my soul? That's why you're so nice to me, right? Looking at the handkerchief on the ground, Boss Luo got up and picked it up. He lowered his head and said, That's true all along. There was no pain, no resentment. He just stood there quietly like an empty shell. Looking at him like this, Kelowna's Shinryu felt suffocated. She seemed to feel something and said in a trembling voice, You don't have a heart. Maybe. Luochio sighed slowly. Since I became the shop owner around this time last year, this kind of thing seems to have disappeared. But originally, it's hard to define the existence of the so-called heart. All thoughts are just the activities of the mind. Luaccio returned to his calm self and said with a smile, I think all my reactions and actions now are just a form of rational analysis and judgment of the situation. Probably I think it's better to do this and not do it subconsciously. It's really despicable. It was as if thousands of sharp swords were piercing through her heart. In front of her, he seemed to be sucked in by something. In an instant, she seemed to see endless darkness, constantly eroding his thin body. It was as if a pair of hands was hugging him from behind, dragging him into a door of nothingness. Sting, 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 sting. Kelowna's Shinryu's voice trembled. Why did you confess these things to me? Is it the so-called rational thinking? It may be, it may not be. Luaccio shook his head. There are times when people can't distinguish the specific meaning of their actions, and even do it without thinking. I think what I'm doing now is probably in this category. As a human, I always want to keep some of my things. But perhaps what I'm doing now is just the result of rational thinking. It even made me feel that I actually still retain some of my human nature, which led me to explain this to you and then take it one step further. It made me think that resistance might be effective, an illusion. Ew. What are you resisting? Slowly exhaling, Boss Luo smiled. It seems that we talked about some irrelevant things. But I think Ms. Long should be clear about my intentions. So, in the future, you should think more carefully about whether to continue the transaction with me. More or less, you will be more cautious. Kelowna's Shinryu lowered her head and didn't say anything. Boss Luo looked at her silently. If we say that these are all simulated reactions under the control of rationality, she suddenly raised her head. Wouldn't it be very contradictory? Since you want my soul, then you should always be good to me, disturb me, and even make me fall in love with you. Isn't that enough? It'll be easy to get, right? Anyway, isn't it always like this? From the beginning, I've been played by you. I never meant to play. Luaccio shook his head. That's why I said it's not normal. Kelowna's Shinryu rushed in front of Luaccio and stared into his eyes. Since you want to maximize the benefits, why can't you keep lying? Maybe I don't even need these truths. Those are not the truth after all, Luaccio said calmly. The pain of not being able to breathe. Are you crying under this calm appearance, your missing heart, in the place where it's hiding? Is it crying? She felt an indescribable sadness from this young man, even though it was just a flash. Long Shirua suddenly reached out and grabbed Boss Luo's collar. But this kind of intrusion was immediately judged as dangerous by the defense mechanism. Thousands of chains shot out from all directions and wrapped around Kelowna's Shinryu's hands, and even burned her hands. Shinryu's power erupted. Like a moth darting into a flame, she endured the terrible pain and grabbed Luaccio's collar, pulling him in front of her. She pressed her lips on Boss Luo's lips like a seal. Behind Boss Luo, it was as if a door was about to open. The chains contracted crazily and strangled her neck and body. Looking at this scene, in the next moment, even Kelowna's Shinryu's body would be torn apart by the chains. Luaccio waved his hand subconsciously, and the door that was about to open quietly closed again, as if it was unwilling to give up. There was a faint sound of horror, but it eventually faded away. The chains that were strangling Shinryu loosened little by little and then disappeared in the air. At this time, she pushed Luaccio away with one hand, touched her neck, bent over, and gasped in pain. Ms. Long, what are you doing? Luaccio was silent for a while, then frowned and asked, You should know that it's dangerous to get close to me without any explanation. Don't worry, I won't die at this level. She raised her head and stared intently at him. But the true dragon power in her body had already been completely depleted in an instant. It was just a short resistance, and it was already, but it wasn't the time to care about this. She took a deep breath and gritted her teeth. Since you don't think it's real, then make it real. Ms. Long, didn't you say that you became the shop owner not long ago? She walked toward Luaccio again. Did your heart disappear at that time? Luaccio was silent. Longshaw reached out her hand to Luaccio again. But this time, she didn't touch anything. It seemed that Boss Luo restricted her absolute defense. She pressed her palm directly on Luocchio's heart, as if she wanted to feel if there was no heartbeat. I know that 100 years ago, the inhuman realm had a big battle with you guys, but that shop owner wasn't you. That means you guys have a way to change shop owners. So what if you don't have a heart? You just find it. Find it. Luocchio smiled bitterly. She didn't know that the young man in front of her had worked so hard, but she didn't want to think about it. She just wanted to press forward. I don't care. I don't want to care anymore. Listen to me carefully. This is the first man that I, Long Shraw, have ever taken a fancy to. Don't think that I'll let you go so easily. This is the first time in thousands of years that I've been flirted with like this. Do you think you can just say a few nice words and give me a nice guy card? Ms. Long, that's not what I meant. Shut up. I haven't finished yet. Kelowna's Shinryu said angrily, surnamed Luo. Listen to me carefully. I don't care what kind of shop owner you are, and I don't care what's behind you. I swear, I'll definitely free you from its hands. I'll definitely get you, be my man, wash vegetables, and cook for me every day. If you have the ability, take my soul before I succeed. Otherwise, you could just wait to be my man. It was a very domineering declaration. Boss Luo couldn't help but open his mouth slightly. It shouldn't be like this. He was silent for a while, then shook his head and said, I don't have feelings for you. It's because of that scheming maid, right? Luocchio paused. No, he didn't have feelings for her in the first place. Kelowna's Shinryu had nothing to lose. You think that I can't compare to her? But how do you know that you like her so much? And it's not because of this shop. It doesn't matter what you say now. When you're free from its shackles, I'll see if you're still that scheming woman. Anyway, I have plenty of time. I can wait. 1,000 years, 2,000 years, 10,000 years. I can wait. She couldn't take it anymore. Her heart was about to jump out. Kelowna's Shinryu's brain seemed to explode, and she stomped her feet fiercely. What's wrong with a woman taking the initiative? Luocchio couldn't help but frown. Are you sure you've thought it through? Perhaps the words I said to you just now could also be a rational action. My goal was to make you sympathize with me, make you feel heartache, and then lead you to make this kind of decision. Thus, in the end, you fell into my hands. Why are you talking so much nonsense? The true dragon of godly land glared at him. Everything needs to be thought over and over again. I've lived for so many years, and I've long passed the age of calculating this and that. If you want to be a human again, then don't use your brain. Just do what you want. It's because of people like you who have to think through everything and think that you've seen through the world. You're not even halfway through your life, but you still pretend to be sly and use the hypocrisy of the world as an excuse. You make yourself look like an old monk who has seen through the world. And that's why the world is so complicated. You're just a self-righteous brat. People in ancient times weren't as righteous as you. Aren't you tired of living? Luocchio seemed to want to say something, but in the end he smiled and said softly, Ms. Long, why don't you put on your clothes first? I really want to die. M. Chapter 1378. In a small living room next to the living room, Kelowna's Shinryu was standing in front of the wall. She had already put on her clothes and was leaning against the wall, knocking her forehead against it. I want to die, she recalled. Why did I say those words? Impulse. Did I not burn my brain? I want to die, but I don't seem to regret it. She stopped knocking her head against the wall and sighed. She didn't know if it was an illusion, but she felt much better now. Kelowna's Shinryu couldn't help laughing at herself. It seems that honesty has its benefits. How could she not know what she was thinking? She wasn't really a young girl. It was just that Shinryu's heart was hard to provoke. But once it was invaded, it would become quite terrifying. The feelings that had been suppressed for thousands of years were like a flood. Because he had inherited the power of the true dragon, he had directly climbed to the level of the strongest power in the world. He had never needed to be like those Taoists of the Tao sect, who still had to train his mind and temper his state of mind. All the so-called inner demons would be automatically destroyed by a Shinryu's power before they could get close to her. Kelowna's Shinryu never had the so-called inner demons problem. But on the other hand, if such a problem occurred, perhaps even Shinryu's power wouldn't know how to deal with it. Originally, in Kelowna, there was nothing that could disturb Shinryu's heart. Only the owner of this club was out of the norm. That guy. Don't tell me he thinks I'm very casual. Should I go back to the living room? What should I say when I go back to the living room? What should I do after this? Although she had made a declaration, what should she do? She didn't even think about it. It was really just a moment of impulse. And even after calming down, she couldn't help but feel lost. Kelowna's Shinryu touched her lips subconsciously, muttering to herself, "So this is the feeling of a man's lips. I want to die." She stood up abruptly and grabbed her own hair. Then, she took a deep breath, opened the door, and walked out. I don't care anymore. The boat had reached the bridgehead. He couldn't care less anymore. Taking a deep breath in front of the door, Kelowna's Shinryu slowly pushed open the door to the living room and then closed it. Her gaze met with Luacio's. Her back was pressed against the door, and her hands were clutching her clothes uneasily. I've changed my clothes. Yes, I saw it. Luacio smiled. I just made some tea. Come and drink it. That's it? Long Shuruo was startled. Why did this guy act as if nothing had happened? Aren't you coming? Boss Luo asked again with a smile. At this time, the true dragon of the godly land walked over stiffly and then sat down stiffly. His heart was beating very fast. He could stare at this guy for a few seconds before, but now he didn't even dare to look at him. Why was he so nervous? Do you want sugar? Luocio picked up the cup with sugar and asked. No. She shook her head subconsciously and then pretended to be relaxed. Where are they? In the living room. Only she and Luocio were left. As for Huang Jinlong and Teresa, they were still the same. Miss Maid and Luo Dance were still absent. Even the girl Mina seemed to be absent. She remembered, when she started to talk with Luocio, the mysterious girl was not in the living room. She seemed to say she was a little sleepy and wanted to take a nap. Then, she left the living room alone. Yu Yi and Miss Dance are in the kitchen. Boss Luo said casually, I want to make some supper. As for Miss Mina, at the same time, Boss Luo glanced at a certain place, where there was a roll of animal skin diary, but now the diary was gone. She seems to be resting. Oh, Long Shuo answered subconsciously, then looked down at the teacup in her hands and fidgeted. Yes. It's nothing. She laughed dryly. The tea was quite delicious. Well, very good, very good. Tea, you should drink it too. Can't you be a bit more diligent? If you feel bad about what happened just now, do you need me to erase it for you? Boss Luo suddenly suggested. After all, it's because of me that you have these unpleasant memories, so I won't charge you any fee. No, she blurted out. She didn't have the courage to do it again if she really forgot it. That's a pity, Boss Luo said with a little pity. Did I make you feel uncomfortable? Kelowna's Shinryu glared at him. If not for the fact that she couldn't defeat him, she would have smashed his disgusting face. It seems that you are more energetic. Luocio smiled. I was worried that you would be depressed. Kelowna's Shinryu coughed twice. Why was he so calm? Was it because he didn't have a heart? She couldn't help but look at Luocio's eyes. She tried to find something, but after a few seconds, her violently beating heart made her unable to continue looking. She could only lower her head and drink tea. Then she asked casually, "All right, what were you thinking just now?" Miss Long, are you referring to the matter of me being your man? Boss Luo said casually. Cough, 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 cough. She felt that even her ears were red. Probably the most hateful thing was that this profiteer seemed to be completely fine. He really was a heartless guy. Her heart was filled with hundreds and thousands of displeasure. I mean, free the shop. Kelowna's Shinryu heaved a sigh, glaring at him before saying seriously, there must be a way, right? Since the shop owner can be replaced. Haven't you considered finding a replacement for you? Or you don't have this idea at all? You don't want to give up that scheming woman? Yes, I did. Kelowna's Shinryu didn't expect such an affirmative answer. Luo Chio said slowly, but unfortunately, I haven't found a way yet. The shop owner can also buy what he needs from the shop, but so far, I haven't been able to open this part of the content. Why? She frowned. You're the shop owner. What can restrict you? After all, what's the nature of this shop? Luocio looked at her, saying softly, Miss Long, you can't pry anymore. Because even I don't know what will happen to you if you continue to pry. Besides, I can't tell you this question as free information. Then buy it. Kelowna's Shinryu said carelessly. She was thinking about how to free this man. I'm afraid. Boss Luo smiled bitterly. Even if you become mine, it's not enough. Puff. Cough, cough, cough. How could he say these words so easily? Damn it. Really so serious? Long Shuo opened her mouth. I mean, if I continue to pry. Boss Luo nodded slightly. Kelowna's Shinryu didn't say anything. After a while, the true dragon seemed to have gotten used to the current atmosphere and perhaps thought about many things. I understand, she said calmly. Before my power, or rather, before my value is high enough, I won't pry into your truth, but that doesn't mean I'm giving up on what I've said before. Boss Luo opened his mouth, asking curiously, Miss Long, why do you want me to be your man? Puff. Cough, cough, cough. I mean to free you. Free you. Do you understand? Kelowna's Shinryu said angrily. Don't misunderstand me. It's not just for you. I have a deeper consideration. Yes, I admit that your existence can bring unprecedented convenience to those who need it, and even fulfill their wishes. But as I've discussed with you before, even without you, individuals can accomplish most things with their own efforts. Instead, it's because of your existence that everyone relies on you. And your ultimate goal isn't to take away the souls of others. Although I don't know what you want these souls for, there's one thing I'm sure of. If you continue to exist, what will happen to this world in the end? And your power is too dangerous for this world. She looked at Luocio and said seriously, I can't watch this potential danger erupt in Kelowna. Especially you, I don't want to see your power go out of control one day. Even I can't resist for a moment. So, because of these considerations, I want to free you and then find a way to deal with the power behind you. I see. Boss Luo nodded and smiled. I believe you, Miss Long. But if that's the case, you don't need me to be your man. Puff. Cough, cough, cough. She slammed her hands on the table and stood up all of a sudden. The moment she stood up, the stool fell back and hit the floor, making another bang. She stared at him. Luocio was startled. At this moment, she didn't avoid his eyes. You really like to spoil me so much. This was a look of weakness that she had never shown before. Luocio opened his mouth, subconsciously reaching out his hand to touch the face in front of him, but he quickly put down his hand halfway. Unexpectedly, Shinryu of Kelowna grabbed his hand and put it on his face. What are you afraid of? Is it so difficult to touch me? Look at me and tell me, am I real to you, or am I fake? Suddenly, I feel very happy. Luocio didn't pull back his hand. Someone cares about me so much. Thank you. Except for her at home and Yi, no one else would care about what was precious to him or what was real. After all, in the eyes of all the people he met, he was always excellent and omnipotent. Don't move. Long Shuo gritted her teeth at this time. She had already reached this point, but she didn't want to retreat. The true dragon of the divine land, who had decided to go all out, walked around the table and hugged the guy in the seat into his arms. I may not be a qualified person to talk to, but we still have time. If you have something that you can't say to others, or something that's uncomfortable in your heart, you can come to me. There are some things that you can't say to your maid, right? Just like the last time you were alone. That was the night when the entire hemisphere had a blackout. Luocio still listened to her and didn't move. He slowly closed his eyes and felt the warmth of her body. He could hear her heartbeat. It was strong and powerful like the mountain wind, like the flow of a river, endless. He took a deep breath and said softly, Miss Long's body has the smell of mountains and rivers. It really makes people feel at ease. Is that so? Kelowna of Shinryu made a gulping sound. If you like it, I'll let you feel more. You may not be able to escape. Luocio suddenly said in a low voice, I can't give up on getting your soul. Do you understand? Then come on. She lowered her head and gently stroked his hair. Let's see if I win or lose. When you're released from its hands, give me an answer. After a while, she let go of Luaccio. Boss Luo thought for a while and said, I have a feeling that even in the situation you described, I'll still choose Yu Yi. What he said was too true. Shinryu of Shinryu staggered and said indignantly, Can't you say something appropriate? Any deception can hurt you. Luaccio shook his head. Kelowna of Shinryu frowned and grabbed Boss Luo's collar again. He stepped on his stool and said condescendingly, Listen, kid, if you don't even give me a chance to compete, don't even think about getting my soul. Didn't you say that you owe me a favor? It's not too much for me to ask, right? I feel. Boss Luo smiled bitterly. I'm caught in my own trap. What are you unhappy about? Shinryu of Luaccio's collar again. He almost wrote the word evil on his face. No, I just feel that it's a bit inappropriate to use this request so quickly. Luaccio of Shinryu of Kelowna shook his head. Longshaw of Kelowna snorted. Why not use it when you can use it? Leave it to rot? You're right. It's completely Miss Long style. Luaccio of Kelowna laughed like a child. Then, his face became serious, as if he was making a promise. I'll carry out your request, Your Majesty the King. Shinryu of Kelowna's wrinkled collar, and then turned around. I've never been gentle. You have to be careful. One day, I'll pull you out of that abyss. #######PS 326. Chapter 1379. On the high platform, suspended above the enormous river of Qi, there were 12 colossal dragon statues surrounding it. Each one had the appearance of a 5-clawed golden dragon. The young girl was dressed in white, and she didn't have any extra accessories on her body. She walked barefoot on the floating stones that led to the high platform. The voice came from all directions, as if it was 1 or 12 different voices. From now on, you will abandon everything as a human. All living things will be equal to you. The girl walked forward step by step. Suddenly, an anxious voice came from behind. Under the huge and terrifying power, the thing behind could only crawl on the ground. It turned out to be a huge dragon turtle. Your Highness, think carefully. No need to say more. The girl's eyes were firm as she walked towards the high platform. I have made up my mind. From now on, Xinyuan Shiro will no longer exist in this world. Suddenly, a chill came. Kelowna's Shinryu woke up from her light sleep. She felt that her hands and feet were a little cold. She was still in this living room. She fell asleep unknowingly, which made her feel a little surprised, or it could be said that fatigue made her fall asleep unknowingly. She had only blocked the chains and Luaccio's defense for a moment, but her strength was almost exhausted. Did you have a nightmare? Luaccio sat beside her. How long have I slept? Longshaw rubbed her forehead. About 5 minutes. Luaccio looked at the time and said, You look tired. Do you want to rest more? You will feel better. Kelowna's Shinryu shook her head and then looked at this guy with annoyance. You know this is not Kelowna. I recover very slowly. Do you need help? Longshaw shook her head. No, it's nothing urgent. I don't have to recover immediately. Don't worry, I will judge based on the situation. Instead of worrying about me, you should worry more about yourself. Do you know what happened to your last one? Why did she have that dream? She used to not very clear. Luaccio shook his head. Not sure. Kelowna's Shinryu opened his mouth wide and said in disbelief, Have you never thought of going over to investigate? What are you doing? Besides, haven't you always been very good at gathering information? Is there anything you can't know? Boss Luo said subconsciously, When my predecessor transferred the store to me, he must have done something to keep it a secret. Maybe he also spent a lot of money so that I wouldn't know what he was doing in a short period of time. All I know is that he doesn't have much time left. Why did he transfer the store to you? Kelowna's Shinryu frowned and began to think about Luaccio. When she set a goal, she seemed to become more active. When the uncertainty in her heart was calmed down because of the release, she seemed to be able to put aside the occasional restlessness and think about more important things. Even if she didn't know whether this so-called love would blossom or not, she didn't think about it for thousands of years. It was the first time that she had ever thought about it. She was very confused about the future. There was probably no story in history that could be used as a reference. But even if she didn't know the future, she wouldn't give up easily. Whether it was for herself or for the stability of Kelowna, she had to find a way to liberate Luaccio. Even if she couldn't eliminate the store, she had to at least find a way to limit it. Come to think of it, the true dragon of the divine land, who had been getting lazier and lazier in the past 100 years, seemed to have found some kind of motivation all of a sudden. Even if his strength was still slowly recovering, his spirit was quite vigorous. Luaccio shook his head and didn't answer. Longshaw couldn't tell whether he didn't know or he couldn't say it according to the rules. She lowered her head and bit her fingernails and then asked, "Does your little lover know about this situation and that scheming mind? Girlfriend?" Boss Luo thought for a while and said, "I should have disclosed the relationship between Yu Yi and me. If it's a lover, it should have a different meaning." Kelowna's Shinryu stared at him. "If I say so, then so be it. Didn't we agree that I also have a chance to compete? Or you can't say this part?" Luaccio just didn't want to talk about this matter. In fact, Kelowna's Shinryu's intuition was right. He couldn't discuss the deeper matters of the club with Miss Servant Girl. Every time it involved some internal matters, time always stopped on Yu Yi. Thinking about this, he thought that it was extremely difficult to get the information from the altar of the previous boss. It was possible that the previous boss had paid a great price to restrict Yu Yi. Maybe the previous boss had also restricted Yu Yi, and it wasn't related to the club itself. Something like that. It seemed to open another line of thought. At this time, Kelowna's Shinryu sat cross-legged on the sofa with dissatisfaction. Holding his chin, he looked at Luaccio unhappily. "You can't even tell me the key information, and there's not even a hint to pass the level. How do you expect me to fight? I'm really stupid. I knew that all these could be your trap, but I still foolishly walked into it. Maybe you're still secretly happy in your heart." After Kelowna's Shinryu's confession, his words became very sharp. Boss Luo felt a little uncomfortable. He could only smile bitterly. "Forget it. I won't make things difficult for you." Longshaw finally sighed. "I don't want to lose the impression points that I've earned with great difficulty. There aren't many left. Miss Long, you don't have to belittle yourself like this." Luaccio shook his head. "Actually, I always think highly of you, although I know you're referring to something else." Kelowna's Shinryu smiled bitterly, "But I still feel inexplicably happy when I hear these words. In my opinion, it's really hopeless." Luaccio opened his mouth. When he was about to say something, she suddenly stretched out her finger and pressed Boss Luo's lips. "It's not the final conclusion yet. Don't say anything. As long as you don't get rid of the thing behind you, I won't believe anything you say. What I want is the answer when you get your heart back." Boss Luo nodded. Kelowna's Shinryu said seriously, "Also, you're not allowed to tell this to your little lover. If you really can't help it, then treat it as a confidentiality agreement I bought." Luaccio asked curiously, "Why do you need to keep it secret?" Kelowna's Shinryu blushed. Who knew what revenge that scheming woman would take? That scheming woman was really evil. She marked each card with a perfume scent. Was this something a human would do? "Anyway, I said no, it's not allowed." Longshaw said angrily, "God knows what she's hiding behind. If she knows that I want to set you free, will she do something to hinder me?" Originally, in order to keep a person to satisfy all his needs, even using feelings as a restraint, or using beauty to make a man unable to leave, there have always been cases. Since ancient times, how many heroes have fallen in the hands of women? Boss Luo shook his head. "Yi, she's not like what you think." Kelowna's Shinryu snorted. "I don't care about this. After all, I'm fighting with her for a man. I already have no advantage. If I let her know my intention, what if I become a box? I don't want such a miserable start. Do you think I'm overbearing?" "That's good." Luaccio shook his head. "No matter what, Miss Long is still like this. It's easier to get used to it. I'll go check on Agile." Kelowna's Shinryu stood up, quickly leaving the living room to escape from Luaccio's sight. After she disappeared, Luaccio withdrew his gaze, gently rubbing a string of beads on his wrist. After becoming the store manager, am I really restricted by the previous manager? Luaccio frowned slightly. Logically speaking, the previous manager should have visited the store from the very beginning. Even if it wasn't the store, the previous manager should at least have visited it. But since when did this kind of thought slowly faded away? And he even felt that it was natural. If Longshaw didn't say so, he wouldn't even feel that there was anything wrong with it. The only thought he had was to find clues about the previous manager when he was ready. Prepare? What should he prepare? He seemed to have never thought about this question. His heart moved, and he instantly closed his eyes, connecting with the altar through the connection that even the existence of the dimensional crack couldn't cut off. Determine the information. Is there any restriction on me from the previous manager? Or is there any restriction on my thinking? Life points deducted successfully. Boss Luo felt his life points decreasing, and at the same time, he received a response from the altar. Confirm. Sure enough, even though he received such a response, he was still very calm. He didn't feel any fear. Maybe it was because he didn't have such feelings, or maybe it was because he instinctively felt that even with this layer of restriction, it didn't seem to pose any threat to him. Remove. Almost without thinking too much, Luaccio requested the altar to remove the restriction. But at this time, his life points didn't decrease at all. Luaccio couldn't help but frown, thinking for a while, consume 50% of my remaining life points. Part of the restriction is removed. He calmly waited for a moment. There was still no ripple in his heart. Finally, time began to pass quickly on him. Until half of his life points were deducted, the high-speed time flow stopped. But Luaccio didn't feel any change in his body, and all his authority in the club was still the same as before. The only difference was that the desire to understand the previous one had suddenly become stronger. It was to the extent that the thought of searching for the previous one had become clearer. Time passed little by little, and the bead chain slowly rotated on his wrist. Luaccio looked at the darkness of the courtyard outside. After a while, he slowly exhaled and suddenly said, "Miss Maria, are you awake?" The sudden voice made her, who was sitting on the other sofa with her eyes closed. Her eyelids twitched subconsciously, and then she opened her eyes a little, looking around cautiously. She propped herself up and sat up. Then, she suddenly sucked in a breath of cold air and covered her abdomen. It seemed that because of the severe pain, cold sweat seeped out of her forehead, and her face became pale. Luaccio looked over, and he knew that it was Maria who woke up this time. As for Teresa's soul, she was in a deep sleep. The sisters were switched back again. "Where am I?" Miss Switch, who was in inexplicable pain, asked weakly. "Just now. Wasn't it? She couldn't adapt to this bright living room. She should have been in the pit of bones before she fainted. We're out of danger." Luaccio smiled. "Miss Maria, it seems that you and Miss Teresa didn't just exchange souls. Your bodies were also swapped at the same time. So you can see it. Wait for me first." At this moment, Miss Witch smiled bitterly, then put her palm in her collar, endured the pain caused by the movement, and then grabbed a small bottle from her collar. She drank the liquid inside. It seemed to be some kind of healing potion. "Why do I feel like my ribs are broken?" The painful expression on her face began to fade. After a few deep breaths, she returned to normal, stood up, and moved her body. "I feel much better. By the way, what is this place, little brother?" "In a villa in the Torito clan's farm." "Farm?" Miss, which opened her mouth, then frowned, trying to recall what happened, but she found that the memory of the Zhong family was missing. Because Teresa was in a deep sleep, she couldn't get the information from her sister when she was in a deep sleep. But it seemed that they were out of danger. Miss Witch couldn't help but lower her head and ponder. Then she inadvertently saw Luaccio's gaze. She scratched her head and said, "Are you curious about what happened between me and my sister?" "I'm just a little curious." Luaccio smiled. "Of course, it's okay if you don't want to talk about it." She continued to grab at her messy hair. "Actually, it's not a big deal. It doesn't matter if I tell you. That's right, Teresa and I didn't just exchange our souls. We also exchanged our bodies. To put it simply, if I'm seriously injured now, but as long as it's Teresa, she will be fine when she appears. Similarly, even if she's injured, It's the same when I appear. What a wonderful symbiosis. Boss Luo carefully looked at her again. The information flashed in his mind like it was free. Before he had time to carefully analyze this information, Miss Witch in front of him suddenly narrowed her eyes and said with a playful smile, "In other words, I, your elder sister, have some parts of my body that can be developed twice in a row. In both times of the effects of virginity, I have a girlfriend." Boss Luo said casually. He had finished sorting out the information about this witch's special situation. It was the coexistence of two bodies on the space axis. Miss Maria looked helpless at this time, patting her forehead and said, "What an unromantic boy." "Huh, where's my craft paper baghead cover? This is bad. Hashtag, 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 PS1. Thank you to the character. Heart is always calm for the reward. You gave Miss made a cute master. PS2. Thank you to the leader of Lemon Candy 2. PS3. Thank you to the accumulated cute master of 10U10 How. I hope to see you again. PS4. 26 minus 3 plus 2 plus 1 plus 2 is equal to 28. 28M? Chapter 1380. She had no choice but to think more about the club after escaping from the living room. Perhaps she should ask Hui Yao about the war between the inhuman domain and the club 100 years ago. All the information from that time should still be kept. Perhaps she could find some clues, since the previous one could replace the current traitor. If it was him. Hui Yao, this little rascal, what the hell is he doing? Something seemed to flash by outside the window. Kelowna's Shinryu subconsciously looked out of the corridor window and then frowned. This is... In the living room, Luo Chio had a strong sense of déjà vu when he saw Miss Witch hurriedly taking out things from her collar and throwing them out. She looked like an ant on a hot pan. As if she was looking for something, Luo Chio quietly snapped his fingers. "Miss Maria, your hood seems to be over there." He then pointed at a table not far away. Thank God. She almost flew over and then directly put the craft paper bag over her head without saying a word. Fortunately, Master Pansy didn't see it. Otherwise, it would be terrible. By the way, where's Master Pansy? Why isn't she with you? She's preparing supper. It should be about time. Luochio smiled. Maria sighed. After calming herself down, she planned to sit back down. At this time, she found Master Moreau lying strangely in the corner like a corpse. She could not help but be stunned. Then, she hurriedly ran over. As the only one who was willing to help her up, she struggled to put her down on the sofa. It seems that a lot has happened. Maria touched the sweat on her neck. Then, she simply learned about what happened during her hibernation for Boss Luo. So, we're not completely out of danger yet, right? Also, Teresa's blood was sucked by an unknown vampire. Miss Maria, can't you find out the specific situation for Miss Teresa, or the appearance of the criminal? Luochio suddenly asked. Maria shook her head. Our memories are not shared. We can only know each other's thoughts and experiences through communication. But my sister is fine. She probably just lost a little blood. She'll be fine as long as we replenish it later. Luochio thought for a while and said, Can you tell me, when did you and Miss Teresa become like this? Maria thought for a moment and said, It's been about 2 years. This child suddenly appeared in my body one day. Didn't you two grow up together? Maria shook her head and said, No. In fact, in my past memory, there was no Teresa at all. I can also say with certainty that I am an only child. There's no such thing as my father or mother having an affair without my knowledge and giving birth to a younger sister outside. She really did appear in my body one day, or rather, she became me. Then, before she appeared, did Miss Maria do anything or encounter anything special? Boss Luo thought for a while and asked, What did I do? Maria recalled and said, If you want to say so, I've been wondering if it was because of that expedition. But in fact, later I contacted the participants of the expedition team, and it seemed that only I had such a situation. What kind of expedition? We just went to explore the tomb of an ancient pharaoh. Miss Witch shrugged and said, That tomb was so poor that there wasn't anything valuable in it. In the end, we only found a ring. Our companion said that it was the ring of the eagle god. Later, I found someone to appraise it, and that guy said that it was just a replica and had no value. The ring of the eagle god. Boss Luo's heart skipped a beat. Is it the Eye of Horus? Yes, there's such a name. Maria was not surprised that Luocio knew about this. After all, in her opinion, since this young healing magician could be the partner of the master of Pansy, he was probably not an ignorant and incompetent gigolo. Then what happened to this ring? It's just a replica, Miss Witch said indifferently. Miss Witch said nonchalantly. Later, he was casually sold to a member of an expedition team that was also exploring nearby. His name was, what was it again? I think he was the descendant of a very famous musician. I can't remember. Luocio said, this happened after the ring was sold and before Hiawassee sold the ring. Not long after the ring was sold, right? Maria thought carefully and said, it should be not long after I left Egypt and returned to Britain. In fact, after this incident, I went back to the tomb of the ancient pharaoh alone, but I didn't find anything. In fact, I also thought that it might be because of the ring. Maybe the ring itself has some mysterious power, but I didn't identify it at that time. But the person who bought the ring at that time couldn't be found. I see, Boss Luo nodded. It turned out that the Eye of Horus in Miss Xiao An's hand that he met at the airport came from this way. Then, Miss Teresa, didn't you say where you came from? She said she forgot. Maria said helplessly, this child seems to have forgotten a lot of things. She even forgot her name. I was the one who gave her the name Teresa. These 2 years were quite inconvenient when I think about it. She was like a blank piece of paper. In order to teach her, I even postponed many appointments. Then, I unknowingly reached this age. But Miss Maria seems to care a lot about Miss Teresa. Boss Luo smiled and said, otherwise, you wouldn't have allowed her to spend time with you. I can see that Miss Teresa is quite satisfied with her current life in this world. Maybe. She seemed to be a little dispirited. Miss Maria, can you tell me the exact location of the tomb of the pharaoh at that time? It's not impossible. Maria blinked and said, but that tomb has been emptied. There's nothing left. Luocio smiled and said, if there's a chance, just treat it as an archaeology. Miss Witch shrugged, took out a pen and paper from her collar, and wrote a set of numbers on it. Latitude and longitude, okay. Luocio nodded. That's the best. At this moment, the door of the living room opened, and little butterfly monster walked in first. She held a tray with both hands, and the aroma of the food floated slowly. Boss, we can start eating. This big sister woke up. What's on her face? If it was only Master Pansy who came in, Maria wouldn't feel anything. But it was, why was there one more? It's someone I met on the way. Boss Luo gave such an explanation. Looking at the sweet girl in front of her, Miss Witch opened her mouth and looked at Boss Luo after a while, and whispered, although I didn't plan to ask, I really couldn't help it. Why do you always meet people you know? So did the 2 female vampires in the castle. Probably it's because of luck. Luck and love. After a little ridicule in her heart, Miss Witch finally shook her head and then ran to curry favor with Master Pansy rather enthusiastically. Master, you've worked hard. Let me help you. Miss Maid just smiled slightly, and after giving the food in her hand to Maria, she walked slowly to her master's side. Just as she approached, she heard Miss Maid say softly, Master seems to have Miss Long's scent on him. Boss Luo smiled and said, I was bought a confidentiality agreement. Miss Maid's eyes turned, but she didn't look too surprised, and just said with a faint smile, it seems that he was targeted. What delicious food did you make? Boss Luo skipped the topic. Yuya's temperament had always been like this. It was fine to say that she was generous, but it was also fine to say that she was born with strong self-confidence. In fact, both of them actually understood. If they didn't enjoy some small interactive games between couples, there wouldn't be any conflicts. The degree of mutual trust could only be broken when a stronger power that could change his and her memories appeared. Obviously, such a power didn't exist. Miss Maid said, because it's a midnight snack, I prepared some light dishes and made some floury dishes. Miss Agile also helped a lot. She carefully introduced those arts like food. Luocio listened very happily as usual, At the same time, he secretly connected with the altar again. Judgment. This time, her life didn't disappear. It seemed that the previous owner didn't do anything to Miss Maid. Would she know that he had removed part of the restriction? Boss Luo couldn't help but think. But no matter what, he still didn't feel any potential threat, not even a sense of uneasiness. He couldn't help but feel a little awkward. Did the Absolute really exist? At this time, there were some noises outside the house. It seemed to be from the inside of the farm town. There seemed to be some commotion in the town. What happened? Miss Witch became nervous all of a sudden. Boss Luo waved his hand. The huge, curved screen that Shinryu complained about directly opened. It showed everything that happened in the town at a glance. Oh, this is a good surgical method. Maria was stunned, but she couldn't figure out which magic method this was. Obviously, in a magician's world, there were many similar methods. Maria knew that this little brother of hers was far more powerful than she imagined when this little brother of hers with healing ability absorbed all the magic power of the highly concentrated secret crystal in an instant. So, when the curved screen appeared, she wasn't too surprised. What were they doing? In the projection inside the town, the vampires of the Torito clan seemed to have some internal strife. Now, both sides were confronting each other. The modern world, Eurasia, on a mountain peak not far from the Holy Land, there was a fierce storm. The lights of the Holy Land in the distance seemed to be extinguished at any time in the wind and rain. Suddenly, the sky was filled with thunderbolts. Then several bucket-sized thunderbolts intertwined. The space was distorted, and a figure slowly appeared. It had a red, muscular upper body, legs that looked like the hind legs of a black goat, and flapping black wings. It looked like the demon described in all the literature. The thunderbolts dispersed, and it stood in the wind and rain, letting the storm wash over its body. Its dark red, gem-like eyes were now looking at the Holy Land not far away. It stretched out its hand and gently held it. Legend, the Barren Land. Demon language. Suddenly, it swooped down and crashed into a cave on the mountain peak. Walking on a muddy ground leading to the inner part of the cave, the water on its body quickly receded. It didn't take much time to reach the deepest place. There was an old man here. He should have looked healthy, but his grayish-white hair had already fallen halfway to his waist. The old man seemed to live here. There was only a simple stone bed, some dry straw on the bed, and an old music box. At this time, the old man was standing in front of the rock wall. In addition, there were candlesticks all around. The light made this place very bright. It looked at what the old man was doing at this time. He was painting a mural on the rock wall with some kind of plant ink. Master! The demon in the cave lowered its head this time, kneeling on the ground with one knee, and whispered, "The subworld seal is too strong now. I spent a lot of time to use this demon's body to avoid the monitoring of the Arrayus system and arrive here." The old man didn't respond, but continued to paint the mural. At this time, the demon said again, "The arrangement is almost done." The old man suddenly stopped, lowered his head, and looked at what he had just painted on the rock wall. After a while, he said, "I lost another part of my memory. I can't remember your name." "It's already so serious?" The demon suddenly raised its head. The old man slowly said, "It can't support me for long. And obviously, the restriction I set for the next one when I left has been noticed." "It's so fast." The demon was slightly surprised. The old man shook his head and said, "There's nothing to be surprised about. This is something I knew from the beginning. What I can do is to minimize the next one's interest in me, and this has almost exhausted half of my accumulation." "Master, then won't you become very dangerous?" "No. Relatively speaking, I will still be safe." The old man shook his head and slowly walked back to the stone bed. "It doesn't matter, even if this part of the restriction has been removed. Anyway, I can't cause any substantial harm to the next one, or in this multidimensional world, there's no such thing. But because of this, I will be safer." "You mean," the old man smiled and said, "because there is no harm, and I am standing in the absolute center. I can't see clearly what is behind me, and I can't be sure to what extent the thing behind me can do. I will be doubtful if there is anything that can contend against it, even if the thing behind me has proven time and time again that it has no opponent. Being suspicious has always been an individual's nature. So, no matter how much the next one knows, no matter what kind of safe environment he is in, he will still be unable to help but think, to make assumptions, to do something because of something that doesn't exist. When he comes back to his senses, he will understand that all this is just him fighting against the air. When it is relatively low, we have won a relatively sufficient amount of time. With a bitter smile, the old man suddenly said, "We don't have any means to contend against the origin, so we can only play this kind of psychological trick." "Time, is it really enough?" the demon whispered. The old man was silent for a moment and said, "In order to not let the same thing happen again, we can only do this. This is the last time you will see me. Next time, you should not be able to see me. After I disappear, you can begin." "Master," the demon whispered. The old man slowly waved his hand. "Go. The Arrayas system has already developed antibodies against you. You can't stay for too long." Turning around, the demon knew that it could not stay for too long. This time, it had already paid an unimaginable price just to enter this place and meet its master. "I will definitely complete the final arrangement." Once again, he was left alone in the cave. The old man stood up again and returned to the cliff, starting a new round of painting. He smiled and said, "If time permits, perhaps we can meet once. Your Highness." What he drew this time was a little bluebird. Chapter 1381. Outside the small villa, a small figure was pacing back and forth. It had been a while. It seemed to be trying to see what was going on in the house through the open curtains, but it didn't get anything useful. Just as it was about to leave uneasily, a figure overshadowed it from behind. Startled, it grabbed its collar and turned its body around in fright. This frightened it so much that its mouth opened wide and its eyes widened. It couldn't help but ask itself, why did it come to this place? It was said that the children were not allowed to leave the dormitory at night. A while ago, in the farm, "Hurry up. He had to clean up the inn before the upper nobles arrived. You, hurry up. Can someone tell me why the bed in the third room hasn't been delivered yet? Where are the paintings?" A group of teenage boys and girls were gathered in front of the window, looking at the busy figures on the street. Many of the children had a look of amazement on their faces, because to them, even these busy figures were rarely seen. Only when they were called by name would they meet on the way to the castle, the attendants of the nobles. "I heard that from tonight onwards, many nobles will come to live in our town. This is the first time I've seen it." The excited boys and girls gathered together to discuss. Not only here, but also in the other dormitories, the situation was similar. "Doni, do you know why?" Soon, the children in this dormitory turned their eyes to the girl named Doni, because Doni had just completed the dedication of the nobles in the castle. She came back from the castle, so she should know what happened. Doni had been named several times in a row and was the object of envy of the children in this dormitory. "I don't know either." Doni shook her head. Facing the question of her companions, she had to remain silent because on the way back, the attendant had ordered her not to speak. All the orders of the vampires in the castle were absolute and must be obeyed unconditionally. This was the knowledge that had been instilled in her since she was born. "Well, children, dinner is about to begin." A male dormitory supervisor with a kind smile gently shook the bell in his hand. "Who's on duty today?" "Me. Me too." "Head eunuch Tabanais." "Me too." Several children walked out in high spirits. Then, under the direction of Housemaster Tabanai, they began the work of distributing food to everyone. In the spacious canteen, the 3 rows of long tables were already filled with young boys and girls. The food was naturally quite sumptuous. It had always been this sumptuous. "Duoni, why don't you join us for dinner?" At this time, the kind dormitory supervisor came to the girl's side and found that she was still looking out of the small window in the corridor. "Ah, Lord Housemaster Tabanai." The young girl was shocked. She quickly lowered her head and said, I'm on my way." "Are you worried about Mina?" The dormitory supervisor bent down slightly. "Yeah," Duoni nodded. I'm a little worried that she hasn't come back yet. Many of our companions fell. I heard that they were already. Don't worry. The nobles have already started their rescue work. The housemaster patted Dooney's head. Besides, to the nobles, you are their most precious assets, so they definitely won't put you in danger. Yeah. She quickly recovered her spirit. Duoni and Mina have always been very close. The dormitory supervisor touched the girl's cheek again. If Mina knew that you were so worried about her, she would be very happy. Yeah, Duoni and Mina are the best. The girl smiled sweetly. Because they grew up together, so they're best friends. All right, Duoni, you should go eat too. The dormitory supervisor smiled. The girl was startled. Then she turned around and smiled sweetly. Okay. The girl quickly returned to the dining hall and blended into the crowd. The dormitory supervisor outside the door looked at the girl's cheerful face and quietly took out a notebook, as if he was writing something down. Duoni and Mina's relationship is very good. The dormitory supervisor wrote while talking to himself. Maybe next time, it could be a special recommendation. If it's reported, there should be nobles who like it, right? But before that, Duoni doesn't seem too bad. A plaything for the nobles. Dormitory supervisor Tabini. At this moment, a girl wearing the same dormitory supervisor's uniform quickly walked over. In this dormitory, she was the assistant who had been helping dormitory supervisor Tabini. He quickly put away his notebook and said indifferently, "Is there anything I can help you with? There are nobles patrolling outside looking for you." The girl lowered her head and said respectfully, "Looking for me?" Tabini was slightly surprised, but he nodded. After instructing his assistant to take care of the boys and girls in the dining hall, he went alone. It wasn't a particularly important matter. The few patrolling guards in front of dormitory supervisor Tabini were just sending a girl back. It was the girl named Mina who was appointed to go to the castle today. Take her away and arrange it. The patrolling vampires left after saying this and didn't talk much with the dormitory supervisor. Dormitory supervisor Tabini, who didn't have any dissatisfaction with this, immediately showed a worried look after the guards left. "Mina, you're finally back. I was so worried." The dormitory supervisor naturally held the girl in his arms. His hands felt her skin through her thin clothes. He washed his hair and smelled the girl's scent, showing a trace of intoxication. "I'm sorry to make you worry, dormitory supervisor. Mina is fine now." The young girl giggled. "Is everyone eating?" "Mina is hungry too. Can Mina go eat now?" "Of course." Tabini let go of the girl, indicating that she could go to the dining hall. After dinner was the most anticipated thing for the children. The dormitory supervisor told the children some stories that weren't in the curriculum. Not every dormitory had similar activities. In the town, children of similar age were habitually arranged in the same dormitory. For example, 7 to 8 years old, 9 to 10 years old, and so on. This was the dormitory for children between 13 to 15 years old. When they were over 15 years old, they would enter the dormitory for 15 to 18 years old. When they were over 18 years old, they would leave the town. Everyone knew that the town was a safety circle, but when they grew up at 18 years old, they had to shoulder the mission of exploring the dangerous areas outside and bringing back more new lives from the outside. It was said that this kind of after-dinner storytelling was no longer popular in the last dormitory, but some of the children who had just moved up from the lower dormitory were still looking forward to this kind of activity. Of course, some children had chosen to skip it, because their daily homework had begun to increase, in order to gain more favor in the last few years of the life of the nobles. Only the children that the nobles liked the most could enter the castle again after they grew up and continue to serve the nobles as attendants. Among the children, this kind of legend had always been circulating. At this time, in the bathroom, because most of the children were participating in the activities, there were very few people at this time. Only now did Doni have time to talk to Mina, who had returned halfway. "You scared me to death. I thought you wouldn't come back." Amidst the dense steam, the smaller Duoni threw herself into Mina's arms and sobbed softly. "Didn't you come back safely?" Mina softly and gently comforted her, while stroking Doni's smooth neck. There were only 2 small marks left on her neck. After the sacrifice, the wounds would heal within a day, and for those with better physiques, they could be completely healed in half a day. Doni, are we going to the next dormitory next year? Mina suddenly asked softly. She was like a kitten and gently nodded, then tilted her head and said, "Aren't you the same, Mina? We came to this dormitory together, so of course we will leave this dormitory together and go to the next one." Mina giggled and said, "That's true. It should be good to change to a new one this time." As she said, she suddenly turned Doni around and hugged her from behind, gently rubbing her face on Doni's neck. "Itchy, itchy. Is this the feeling?" Mina laughed softly at this time, and at the same time opened her mouth slightly. Like a fish's lips, she sucked on Doni's neck, and the teeth in her mouth gently rubbed against her skin at the same time. It was a little numb and tingling feeling, but it was slightly different from the last time when the aristocrat sucked. After all, she didn't have the sharp teeth of the aristocrat, so she couldn't pierce her skin. But Mina began to bite a little harder. The pain was a little bit closer to the level when the aristocrat sucked. Her body naturally showed the next step. The feeling of being sucked by the aristocrat seemed to be emerging from the inside of her body. It was like a dream, and Doni couldn't even tell whether it was Mina behind her or the aristocrat who kept calling her name. She seemed to be completely overwhelmed by a feeling of happiness, and murmured, "Mina, when we grow up, even if we leave this place, we will always be together." Mina, the steam was getting thicker. The bathroom door suddenly opened, and at this time, a few girls slowly walked in, whispering softly. "I feel that the story now is not as interesting as before. Why don't we not join tomorrow? We have a lot of homework to do." "Hey, is there already someone here? Who is it?" The sound startled the two girls in the pool. They quickly separated. Doni subconsciously touched her neck, and her fingers seemed to have touched a row of neat teeth marks. She couldn't help but pout and look at Mina. "You left teeth marks again? I can't wear clothes that show my neck tomorrow." Mina smiled and said, "Doni really likes to wear beautiful clothes." They laughed and said, wrapped themselves in bath towels and walked to the changing room. When they passed by, they met a few girls who came in, smiled, and said hello to each other, and then went their separate ways. Then they went back to their own things. When leaving the changing room, Mina suddenly turned around and said, "Don't worry. Even if we leave here, we will always be together with Doni." Doni couldn't help but be startled. When she stepped out of the changing room, she saw the figure outside the door, who seemed to have been waiting here for a long time. "Housemaster Dabini." Sidoni was taken aback. She then hurriedly greeted the dormitory head warden. At this time, Housemaster Dabini smiled and said, "Don't be nervous. I'm just patrolling the dormitory. Are you all done bathing?" Doni blushed slightly and nodded. Housemaster Dabini said, "In that case, go to bed early. By the way, Mina, come with me. There are some things I want to ask you alone." "Sure." Mina agreed without even thinking about it. Doni just looked at her strangely and didn't ask anything. Although it was rare for a housemaster to ask someone alone at this time, it happened occasionally. She watched as Mina followed behind the dormitory's supervisor and gradually walked into the darkness of the corridor. Not long after, their figures disappeared from her sight. She suddenly felt a sense of loss. Shaking her head, the girl quickly calmed herself down and walked to her room. "Should I help Mina make the quilt?" she thought. Perhaps she could just sleep on the same bed tonight. The key. When the girl returned to her room, she realized that when she left the changing room, she forgot to get the key because she was in a daze. So, she hurriedly went back the way she came. Fortunately, she soon found the key in the changing room. The girl inside seemed to be playing with it. "Let's go back." Doni smiled, but she suddenly stopped because she vaguely heard the girl inside talking about her. Although she knew that eavesdropping was bad behavior, she wanted to have an urge. But for some reason, she had an urge to eavesdrop on them. She subconsciously swallowed her saliva and inched closer to the door, pressing her ear against it. She was extremely nervous. It was the first time for her to do this kind of thing. "I don't understand what's so good about Doni. Why does she get called out by the nobles every time? It must be because she's too lazy and her breasts are too big. I heard that the nobles prefer to call out girls with small breasts. What do the boys say?" No matter how small they are, they can't be compared with the boys. Okay, stop arguing. Let me ask you something. Who was the girl with Donnie just now? I don't remember her, right? Just now? Oh, right, who is this child? Is there such a child in our dormitory? They were talking about Mina? Donnie was stunned, and then suddenly felt a sharp pain in her head. Chapter 1382. In the room lit by candles, there was a strange fragrance and a slight smell of sweat in the air. After the girl finished bathing, her hair was still wet. Her slightly moist hair casually draped over her back, and one side of her nightgown had already fallen down to her shoulders, revealing the silky, smooth skin between her shoulders and neck. The dormitory supervisor, Tabener, was kneeling not far away from the girl. His hands were tied behind his back, and at the same time, his eyes were covered by a black cloth. Saliva was slowly flowing out from his mouth. At this moment, the girl was sitting on the bed with her legs crossed, and she was holding a notebook that the dormitory supervisor usually carried with him. Slap! The girl also held a 2-foot-long whip in her hand, and the whip directly hit Tabener's back. At this moment, he was only wearing a pair of pants, and there were several bright red bruises on his back, which were obviously caused by the whip. The dormitory supervisor didn't whine. Instead, he suddenly raised his head like a pet waiting to be fed. His eyes were covered by the black cloth, but the rest of his face revealed a longing expression. Mr. Dormitory Supervisor, do you usually bring the children here to do this kind of thing? The girl's voice suddenly sounded with a sweet smile. Use this hallucinogenic spice to make the children lose themselves and then do some strange things. Tabener seemed not to hear it, and his face was still strangely infatuated. The young girl raised her hand again, and the long whip in her palm struck the dormitory supervisor's back again. She lowered her head to look at the notebook in her hand and said with a smile, "It's really detailed. Every child's characteristics have been recorded. Is this the proof you usually use to pick prey? It's also recorded in detail. Well, I didn't intend to do anything to you, but the prey you want tonight is really..." She suddenly closed the notebook in her hand and then smiled. "Do you want to lick it?" The young girl stretched her ankle forward a little, and the dormitory supervisor in front of her pounced on her like a hungry wolf. However, what greeted her was a slap. What a filthy lord. The young lady chuckled, stood up, and stepped on the head of the dormitory supervisor. Compared to those nobles in the castle, as a human dormitory supervisor, you don't seem to be any better. Continuous, frenzied, uninterrupted whipping. For a very long time. When the scars on the dormitory supervisor's back were stacked to the point that it was difficult to see his original appearance, the dormitory supervisor finally woke up from the effects of some kind of hallucinogenic gas. However, the pain in his body had already caused him to lose all ability to move. He suddenly woke up and heard the girl's demonic whispers. "Ah, I wonder if Mina tells these things to the nobles or their attendants. Will the dormitory supervisor be able to play this kind of game with other children in the future? Don't. I beg you. I will never do it again, never again." He begged for mercy in horror. "I was just playing around and satisfying my curiosity. I couldn't do anything to those children. I can't do it. Let me go." "Of course I know." The young lady rubbed her wrist at this time, as if it was sore from the whipping. If the dormitory supervisor really did something, he would have disappeared long ago, right? The nobles are very sensitive to the purity of children. Of course, he couldn't do anything practical. The nobles in the castle naturally wouldn't allow a real human male to become a dormitory supervisor here. Even if it was a male, he would have to go through some special treatment. By the way, dormitory supervisor Tabinal, do you want to be happy? The young lady suddenly lowered her head and asked, "Look, happy?" He subconsciously opened his mouth, but at this time, he felt the black cloth covering his eyes was suddenly lifted. He heard the young lady's voice. "Yes, happy, don't come over. Don't come over." It was as if he had seen something terrifying. His eyes widened in an instant, widened, and he was unable to speak. "Mina, I don't know how she is." Duoni slowly walked out of the locker room absent-mindedly. Thinking of the conversation of the young ladies in the bathroom, she felt a little uneasy. How could they not remember Mina? We grew up together. When we were young, we played together on the grass outside the town, ate together, and went to class together. She couldn't understand. But unconsciously, she came to dormitory supervisor Tabinal's room. Duoni was a little worried and grabbed the clothes in front of her chest. I don't know what Mina and dormitory supervisor Tabinal are talking about. If I knock on the door now, will I disturb them? She hesitated for a long time in front of the door, and finally, she plucked up the courage. But at this time, she found that the door didn't seem to be completely closed. There was still a little gap left. The candlelight in the room showed a little bit of light. Duoni's heart suddenly beat faster. Perhaps if it was just a glance? If they're still talking, let's go back first. Just a glance. Her hand uncontrollably reached for the door handle, and she became more and more nervous. Just like when she was eavesdropping in a locker room just now. She had never done anything like this before, but for some reason, this kind of eavesdropping and even peeping seemed to possess an extremely great and irresistible magic that drove her body and her thoughts. Unknowingly, she had completely deviated from the education she had received in class until now. She had gone against her own character setting. Duoni was supposed to be an obedient child. Her breathing suddenly became rapid. It was a kind of feeling that although she wasn't suffocating, no matter how hard she breathed, she felt that her lungs couldn't be fully opened. Her mind was blank at this time. Finally, her hand was completely on the door handle. Just as she was about to push it open, the door suddenly opened, and the one who came out was Mina. Mina? Duoni was startled and took a few steps back. Her body directly hit the wall behind her, and she was at a loss of what to do. Duoni? Why are you here? At this time, Mina was curiously looking at the girl in the same room with her, then smiled and said, Are you looking for me? Duoni quickly nodded and said in a panic, I saw that you weren't back yet, so I was a little worried, so I was just chatting with Mr. Dormitory Master. There's nothing to worry about. Mina patted her chest and said energetically, Look, falling into the crack is so dangerous, but I came back. Don't worry, don't worry. That's right. Duoni nodded subconsciously. It seemed that as long as Mina was here, she would feel very safe. She was always so reliable. Then, Mina turned around and closed the door of the room and said very politely, Mr. Dormitory Master Tabinal, thank you very much for your teaching tonight. Mina will remember it well. Good night. The door closed. Duoni poked her head out, but she only saw the kind dormitory master standing by the window, looking out. Let's go back. Mina stretched and then held Duoni's hand. I'm so tired. Today, I feel like I can fall asleep as soon as I lie down. Duoni, let's sleep together tonight, okay? Hee. I was planning to do that. She seemed to have forgotten why she came here. The girls disappeared in the corridor. In the dormitory master's room, Dormitory Master Tabinal was wearing his usual work clothes, tidying himself up neatly. He put his personal notebook on the bedside. There was an envelope on it. Then Dormitory Master Tabinal slowly walked to the window. Suddenly, a strange smile appeared on his face. His eyes looked straight ahead as if he saw something precious. He eagerly reached out to grab what he saw with his eyes. Just like that, he stepped over the window frame, falling. Before she could cry out in alarm, her mouth was covered by a hand. Her eyes were still wide open. With the dim light from the small villa and the hazy night, she saw the person in front of her clearly. It was a mature woman. The woman in front of her had black hair, which was very rare in this town, and gentle facial features that were different from most of the children. She was also tall. She was not a dormitory master, nor a town manager. Every dormitory master and town manager in this town could be called by name, except for this woman in front of her. Could it be? I'll let you go, so stop shouting, do you hear me? Duoni was stunned. She did not see the woman in front of her speak, but for some reason, the woman's voice was directly imprinted in her mind. She could not even hear the meaning of the sentence, but she could easily understand the meaning of the sentence. The girl nodded subconsciously. The woman in front of her slowly let go of her hand. Kelowna Shinryu had one hand on her waist. She looked down at the little girl who was sneaking around outside the villa and suddenly narrowed her eyes. This kind of gaze made Duoni feel a little uneasy, and she did not want to look at the woman in the eyes. You are not looking for someone, are you? Long Shuruo retracted her gaze. Although the other party still hadn't opened his mouth to speak, the fact that she could hear his voice made the girl feel very surprised. However, the other party's question made her forget all of this and abruptly raise her head. How did you know? Kelowna's Shinryu asked again. Is it a little girl about your age called Mina? Yes, yes. Duoni nodded quickly, and then lifted her skirt to greet the woman. She quickly said, Noble master, my name is Duoni. Do you know where Mina is? I didn't see her after I was woken up, so I was a little worried about her. That's why I didn't follow the rules. Noble master? Kelowna's Shinryu was startled. Does this little girl think I'm a vampire here? Luo Chio's dead head seemed to be pretending to be a so-called aristocrat during this period of time, right? What does he want to do? Kelowna's Shinryu coughed twice and said, Duoni, right? You said you were woken up, and then you found that. Mina, right? Yes. The girl said nervously. Something big happened in the dormitory. When the town's patrols were patrolling at night, they found Housemaster Tabini dead. The children were scared. Someone died? Long Shuruo was startled. How did he die? Duoni shook her head. I don't know. I heard that he slipped and fell from the window. Is that so? Long Shuruo looked at her and said casually, Since he died, why did you come out? And why did you come out to look for someone? Does this have anything to do with Mina? The girl's expression suddenly became nervous. It was easy to deal with this kind of white lotus. He saw a huge advantage in this girl that he had never seen in Miss Maid. At this time, Kelowna's Shinryu was very happy. No. Huh. The true dragon of godly land narrowed his eyes. He had long heard about the clan's farm. At this moment, he sneered. Don't you know the consequences of lying in front of noble? Or have you forgotten what you were taught all this while? No, I didn't. Duoni didn't. The voice in her head suddenly became stern. The noble lord in front of her seemed to be more terrifying than anyone she had ever seen before. It was as if he had a pair of demon horns on his head. The girl couldn't help but tremble slightly. Under the immense pressure, she trembled as she spoke the truth. So, Long Shuruo frowned. That strange child is the last person who saw your housemaster, right? Duoni nodded. Kelowna's Shinryu muttered. I always felt that this girl was strange. I always felt that something was wrong. Noble master? Duoni looked at him in confusion. This time she could hear the noble master speak, but she couldn't understand what he was talking about. I'm suddenly very interested in this Mina you're talking about. Kelowna's Shinryu smiled at this time. You? Tell me in detail about her. Remember, everything, no matter how big or small. Don't leave out a single word. Do you hear me? This. Okay. In the end, she couldn't disobey the noble master's order. The education she received since childhood was like an omnipresent rule that always hung in her heart. At this time, Kelowna's Shinryu looked at the girl's reaction with satisfaction. He felt the pleasure of IQ suppression. Hashtag PS 128th. Chapter 1383. There seemed to be no problem. Long Shuruo didn't find anything special about the mysterious girl Mina's past from Doni. Just like all the children in the farm, this mysterious girl was brought to the farm to be raised. After more than 10 years, after going through different periods, she had finally grown up to meet the standards of the character setting. If there was anything strange about this mysterious girl, it could be explained by the fact that this was her character setting. But obviously, things weren't that simple. Otherwise, why would Luochio keep flirting with this mysterious girl? Well, in short, they were acting opposite each other. Should he find out the truth? But would it affect what he originally wanted to do? In the end, was this something he wanted to do, or was it something he was forced to do by the thing behind him? Until now, Boss Luo didn't even plan to tell Shinryu of Kelowna that his lifespan was linked to the number of transactions. But even if she didn't know, Long Shuruo had a vague feeling that there was an irresistible factor behind the club owner's deal. Just like how she gave up a lot of things when she became Shinryu. After obtaining the strongest power in the world, troubles came along, but she didn't have any excuse to reject these troubles. Not to mention the kind of shop that surpassed the strongest power in the world. Shinryu of Kelowna suddenly realized that he had really caused a huge problem for himself. He shouldn't have said it out loud. Wouldn't it be better if he just kept it to himself? What was that saying again? Hazy beauty, hazy beauty. That. Doni's anxious voice interrupted Shinryu of Kelowna. She asked hesitantly, Sir Noble, can you tell me now, where is Mina? That's not a problem. Long Shirua thought for a while and said, the person you are looking for is inside. I can bring you in. But you need to promise me one thing. Please speak, Mr. Noble, the young girl Doni hurriedly said. Long Shirua said directly, you can't tell anyone about our conversation just now, including your roommate Mina. Or, especially her, you can't let her know about this. Can you do it? Sir, did Mina do something wrong? Unexpectedly, the young girl, Duoni, suddenly became scared and nervous. Are you going to punish her? Long Shirua casually patted the girl's shoulder and comforted her. Don't worry, there's no problem. Don't think too much and don't think too much. You should just continue living your life the way it was originally. Thinking too much won't do you any good. She nodded, not fully understanding. But at this time, there was some movement from the farm town, and it quickly attracted Long Shirua's attention. She subconsciously looked towards the town and found that something seemed to be happening in the town. She frowned and subconsciously wanted to float up to make her vision clearer. But at this time, Luacio's voice sounded softly in her ear. Miss Long, no need to ask. Come in. We are also watching the scene. Let's go together. You are peeping at me again. Perhaps this reaction was a bit unexpected. After a pause, Boss Luo's voice sounded again. Then next time, I will ask for your permission first. She snorted softly and muttered, even if you don't sue me, I won't know. Long Shirua didn't know whether she agreed or not, but she directly grabbed the young girl's wrist. Come in with me. After you go in, don't say anything, and don't pay attention to the man inside. He is not a good person. Yes, I know. The young girl quickly nodded her head. She didn't know why this noble suddenly became irritated. When opening the living room door, Long Shirua looked around and found that Maria had already woken up. She frowned but didn't say anything. She opened her mouth and said, What happened? After seeing that it was another two women who came in, Maria was subconsciously startled. This little brother of the healing type had so many acquaintances. She didn't intend to say anything, but for a moment, she felt that the atmosphere was a bit strange. She didn't know whether this young little brother could replace the Lord. It should be the upper noble in the clan, and the complex law enforcement team in the clan had a conflict. Boss Luo looked at the scene and said casually, this clan's acting Grand Duke had something to do and temporarily left the clan's authority to his confidant. And he gave an order that made the upper noble extremely dissatisfied. In addition, there seems to be some other small disturbances mixed in. As he said, Boss Luo suddenly looked at the young girl beside Long Shirua and nodded as a greeting. At this time, the young girl, who still remembered the noble master's order, quickly hid behind the noble master and didn't dare to look at the man in the living room. Boss Luo then looked at Kelowna's Shinryu. Kelowna's Shinryu, who felt that he was caught by the tail at this time, straightened his chest at this time. Luocio smiled and said, Don't stand there, come here. Kelowna's Shinryu rolled his eyes and simply dragged the young girl to the side of the little butterfly monster. Then he kept looking at the servant girl beside Boss Luo, as if he was trying to see if he could find something from her. There was nothing. The only feeling was that the pleasure he got from the White Lotus girl, Dory, was instantly gone. Ah, father. Unexpectedly, when she saw the curved screen, the young girl suddenly exclaimed in a low voice. Her exclamation attracted everyone's attention. The young girl quickly lowered her head and said, Is the noble master who named me, Master Luocio. My character is my father's good daughter. Tisk. Kelowna's Shinryu suddenly frowned. Of course, she knew what naming meant. She also knew some of the things that this group of vampire nobles who were on the verge of becoming moldy had done. That being said, she had also told the girl not to understand too many things. Once the belief that had been formed since young and had been formed collapsed, It would probably be one of the cruelest things. So she just showed a slight dissatisfaction and didn't directly explain anything to the young girl. At this time, the servant girl suddenly stood up and said that since there was a new guest, she had to prepare to greet him. Then, she elegantly left from everyone's sight. Regarding this, Kelowna's Shinryu frowned, because when this scheming girl said that she was going to leave for a while, she clearly saw this scheming girl whispering something to Luachio's ear. This pair of master and servant can't communicate without speaking. Who would believe that? But at this time, if she followed them out, would it make her seem, just as she was feeling annoyed, when the servant girl suddenly passed by, she suddenly said to Kelowna's Shinryu, "Miss Rio, are you interested in accompanying me?" Kelowna's Shinryu felt that her thoughts were completely seen through, so she simply sat down and crossed her legs. "I'm tired, not interested." "Then have a good rest, Miss Rio." The servant girl lightly smiled and turned around to leave. Kelowna's Shinryu's mouth twitched and glanced at Boss Luo from the corner of her eyes. She found that he didn't seem to care about this and was only looking at the curved screen with interest. "Hey, isn't this Mr. Norman?" Miss Witch suddenly exclaimed, because at this time, she clearly saw the male vampire that she met at the bottom of the lost crack through the curved screen. Miss Maid said that she was going to prepare to greet the guests, but she didn't directly go to the kitchen. Instead, she quietly came to the back garden of the villa. The light in the house elongated her shadow in the courtyard. She glanced around the courtyard, then directly walked into the courtyard toward the flower wall in the corner. The flower wall was specially trimmed, and the inside was like a maze, but Miss Maid seemed to have a direction early on, so she didn't stop for a moment and walked into the depths of the maze built by the rose wall in a short time. Suddenly, something shot out from behind her. Miss Maid simply moved a few inches away, and the sneak attack could only brush past her body and finally hit a plaster pillar. It was an arrow that was about a foot long. There are really a lot of uninvited guests today. Miss Maid suddenly narrowed her eyes and whispered, "The place out of the master's sight will also be angry." The black flame burned silently, and the flame that appeared out of nowhere instantly burned up a corner of the flower wall. And the thing hidden in the flower wall was also exposed little by little. And at this time, a man and a woman appeared in front of Miss Maid. Both of them had serious injuries, and the clothes they originally wore were tattered in many places, which seemed to be caused by some kind of punishment. The woman was now held in the man's arms, and the man's other hand was holding a crossbow and was trembling and pointing at Miss Maid. Don't come over," the man shouted in a stern voice, and his hands trembled even more. Without speaking, Miss Maid just walked straight to the man and woman. "Don't come over. I'll really kill you," the man said in horror at this time. Miss Maid just fixed her eyes, and the crossbow in the man's hand was directly burned by the black flame. He threw the crossbow away in horror. Before the crossbow fell to the ground, it had been completely turned into ashes. The man couldn't help trembling all over, but he gritted his teeth, pushing the woman in his arms away, and stood up directly, opening his hands to stop Miss Maid. "Go!" Miss Maid's eyes lit up at this time, and she suddenly smiled. "You have a good taste." "You? What are you going to do?" the man asked nervously, and looked back at the woman behind him from time to time. But the woman didn't leave stubbornly, but chose to stay, and directly held the man from behind, with a consciousness of life and death together. Miss Maid said at this time, "Why do you two think I intend to let you kill each other, and only one of you can survive?" "You." The man and the woman couldn't help but become desperate at the same time, and the man even said angrily, "You're a devil." Miss Maid didn't smile, nor was she angry, but just said indifferently, "Look at the two of you. You should have escaped from somewhere, right? Since you're hiding here, that means there's a risk of being discovered. Since you're trying to escape, then if you're caught, you'll definitely face something terrifying. After all, from the looks of it, I can already understand some things. Please let us go." The woman cried at this time, "We'll never secretly spread the truth in the farm. Never again. Don't beg this guy. Don't you understand? To the vampires, we are just their toys from the moment we are born." The man looked at Miss Maid sadly, giving hope again and again, and then crushing it again and again, just to satisfy their twisted desires. Kill me if you want. Even if I die, I'll never go back to that hell. Both the man and the woman were very emotional. Miss Maid opened her palm at this time, and the arrow that had attacked her flew into her palm. Seeking death doesn't require the help of others. You can do it yourself, and it's quite simple. Then, please. She threw the arrow directly into the grass in front of the man. After the fear, the man's face turned pale instantly. He looked down at the arrow on the grass, and a drop of cold sweat slid down from his eyebrows and finally dripped into the soil. I'll wait for you. The man didn't move, but the woman behind him suddenly rushed out at this time, pulling the arrow from the ground, and then biting her teeth, piercing it into her heart. She looked at the man in front of her in grief and despair, and slowly fell to the ground. After falling, she tried to reach out, as if she wanted to catch the other party. Finally, she showed a trace of a smile. The man's mind went blank instantly. He knelt on the ground, looking at the woman's eyes that gradually lost their brilliance, as if she had been drained of her strength. He lowered his head and didn't say anything. What a decisive person. Miss Maid was still expressionless, looking at the man in front of her, and said indifferently, "Relatively speaking, but it's not bad to end it so quickly. After all, it can reduce some pain. So, are you going to accompany her? I can consider burying you here. The environment here looks very beautiful." Or are you kidding? The man suddenly raised his head, and his eyes were still frightened. "Noble master, I'm willing to go back. I'm going to be your breeding pig. It's okay. It's okay. I'm willing to go back." Miss Maid smiled slightly and said, "Oh, but you were willing to sacrifice yourself in front of her just now. What happened? Sir, did you not think clearly for a while? If you go back, your life may be even more difficult. It's better than dying here." The man swallowed his saliva. "Besides, I've been taking care of this woman just to let her protect me from some danger. Now, it's not necessary at all. Noble master, I'm very strong, and I've been mentioned by other noble masters in the past. My genes are excellent, and I can definitely produce more excellent varieties. I can still carry on with the breeding. I really can." "Really?" Miss Maid just nodded, then stepped back a few steps, and then looked at the woman on the ground and said indifferently, "I'll wait for you behind." With that, she slowly left this place. The man was surprised for a moment and finally seemed to think of something. He looked down at the woman under him, only to find that her body began to burn little by little and finally turned into many black flame butterflies and finally dissipated. He suddenly turned back. The woman was standing behind him. ######PS. This is to make up for yesterday's update. Today's update is included, and tomorrow's original update is included. Baidu Search Shamba 1 Chinese Network. No advertising message. Chapter 1384. Black butterflies were fluttering in the air, accompanied by some tragic and sharp sounds coming from behind. A black butterfly stopped in between Miss Maid's fingers, flapping its wings. Even though it was just a work of flames, it looked very lifelike. The tragic sounds suddenly stopped. The butterfly on Miss Maid's finger turned into a black flame, and then slowly dissipated. So did the black butterflies fluttering around her. Yi slowly turned around. The woman came in front of her. Her body was full of wounds, some of which were already there, some of which were just made. Some of the blood belonged to the woman, some belonged to the man. There was even a ghastly wound on the woman's face. It was caused by bites. On her left cheek, a piece was bitten off, and it was still bleeding. The woman and the man had obviously gone through an extremely tragic battle. The cause was not needed to be explained in detail. Miss Maid looked at the woman's eyes and suddenly smiled. "Nice eyes. Name?" The woman opened her mouth slightly. Her lips were dry and wrinkled, as if she had been dehydrated for a long time. But the blood on her face slowly slid down, and soon half of her lips were wet. "May. It was the same dry voice. Miss Maid took out a handkerchief, walked to the woman, meow and carefully wiped the wounds on her face. But the woman did not move. She just looked at all of this blankly and did not instinctively avoid it. Her body was numb. and she also accepted all of this. Do you want your original beauty back? Yi suddenly asked. In fact, if it wasn't for her ragged appearance and the horrifying wounds on her face, she would have been a beautiful woman. After so many years of careful selection and nurturing, there was not a single unattractive descendant of the ancients in the clan farm. Meow Hum just said, "You are not a vampire of the clan," Miss Maid said indifferently. Someone stipulated that only vampires can appear here. Do you regret it? Do you hate it? Do you regret it? If you did not meet me, maybe you could have escaped from here, or maybe you would not have become like this. There was a hint of struggle in Meg Ming's eyes. It turned from emptiness to hatred. In the end, the hatred faded away, leaving only indifference. Perhaps, even if it wasn't you, if we were to encounter similar situations in the future, the result would still be the same, right? I don't want to continue staying in that illusion. What do you want me to do? It's what you want, Miss Maid asked with a smile. Her finger slid down and tapped on Megong's heart. What do you want to do? Vampires. Meow Meow's eyes were filled with anger again. The source of all pain. Remove forever. I will give you the power to take revenge. Miss Maid waved her hand, and a cluster of black flames danced on her fingertips again. The flame suddenly shot towards Meow Meow's cheeks and attached itself to the bite wound on her cheek. She felt something flowing into her body at this moment. This is a seed, Miss Maid said expressionlessly. Only by devouring the soul of the target of revenge can the seed be constantly emboldened. But if you absorb the nutrients other than the target of revenge, you will die directly. Can you do that? Why help me? Although she felt that the power flowing into her body was constantly increasing, she was still a little hesitant. You don't need to know this, Miss Maid said indifferently. You only need to know that this is just an advance of the power. The more you use, the more you have to devour. One day, when the target of your revenge no longer exists, it will be the time of your death. The woman smiled. This was a completely demonic power. But what did it matter? It didn't matter anymore. The people who were still quietly paying attention to the internal conflict of the vampires in the town suddenly heard the sound of the door opening. Miss Maid walked in with a cup of tea with an elegant smile. Seeing this, Maria was very surprised. Master, you are a master, one of the only 3 secret potion masters in the world. How could you be tamed to this extent by a man? She said that this was what she should do, so she eagerly went to help. Miss Maid was able to get away from the trivial matters and went directly to her master. A sheepskin scroll appeared in her hand. Miss Maid handed it to Boss Luo with both hands. The true dragon of the divine land had sharp eyes. He glanced at it and frowned. Who did he make this deal with? Luochio was not very surprised. The star of the deal would not skip his perception. He gave Yi a lot of authority, although she was still a maid of the club in name. In fact, she could hang the title of deputy manager. Is there anything special you want to do? He already knew the content of the sheepskin scroll without carefully reading it. He was only curious about Miss Maid's motive. It was reasonable to say that Yi wouldn't make such a formal deal. Miss Maid said softly. Master's life suddenly drained very seriously. She needs to replenish. She happened to meet a suitable one. Luochio consumed a lot of life because he removed some of the restrictions set by the previous owner. Boss Luo had a smile. With the fantasy world, I don't need to worry about my life anymore. This world is designed by you. Miss Maid said softly, Master may consume a lot of life in the future, so you need to prepare more. Luochio didn't say anything, just reached out and squeezed her palm lightly. The above was just the spiritual communication between the master and the servant. They were more of an eye contact. Kelowna's Shinryu rolled his eyes, but he was more concerned about the sheepskin scroll in Luochio's hand. Golden Dragon Fafnir woke up at this time, not knowing if it was a coincidence or not. Kelowna's Shinryu, who was keenly aware of this, directly flicked his finger. Then the great golden dragon had nothing to do with it. At this time, the girl Dooni, who had been following the order to keep silent, suddenly screamed in horror. Father! At this moment, her face was filled with terror and fear. Her body seemed to have been drained of all strength as she knelt down on the ground with a thud. Her hands pressed against the carpet as she raised her head and stared blankly ahead. At this moment, on Boss Luo's screen, a huge head appeared in front of everyone. It was the head of the superior noble named Baboki. When this face that could be seen every day rolled on the ground without any warning, the vampires of the superior and middle nobles in the square of Farm Town instantly became silent. What they did was almost unified, and they didn't even rehearse it beforehand. That was, they completely focused on Busby, who held the clan's authority at this time. Without a doubt, that was indeed the supreme authority of Tordo clan. It was the proof that the Grand Duke had personally bestowed it to the agent, Baylegan. And now, it was temporarily handed over to Busby by Baylegan. And the first order he gave was to immediately stop all the food supply of the superior and middle nobles, especially the superior nobles, and change it to the regular distribution. How could these superior nobles tolerate eating those inferior blood without souls? Moreover, it was during this period when they were temporarily staying in the farm. Although they certainly thought of some corresponding restrictions in order to protect these crops from being squeezed too much, they didn't expect the restrictions to be so extreme. However, Busby was only a small servant beside Baylegan. He didn't even have the identity of a superior noble. Handing over the clan's authority to Busby was simply an insult to the clan's authority. Even if Baylegan was here personally, he would never dare to say such words to them. Therefore, the superior nobles brought the middle nobles who followed them and stood on this square. Finally, under the watchful eyes of the public, Count Baboki, one of the fiercest troublemakers, was directly beheaded by Busby, who held the clan's authority without any warning. The sharp blade that was pulled out from the clan's authority was still dripping with blood at this moment. The reason why the blade of authority could shock the entire clan was that it was created by the Grand Duke in a special way. The origin of each clan could be traced back to the Grand Duke. It could be said that the clan was a group that spread out with the Grand Duke as the clan's foundation. They and them all had the blood of Grand Duke Torito flowing in their bodies. The blade of authority could be directly used on the Grand Duke's blood. This was the reason why Busby could easily behead Count Baboki. Although Busby's sudden attack was unexpected, it actually didn't include too much of the difference in strength between them. Now, I don't know if any of you still want to question this decision. Busby slowly wiped the bloodstains on the blade of authority and inserted it back into the blade. He then looked around at the silent nobles and waved his hand. Well then, it's getting late. Please return to your residences and get some rest, your excellencies. He raised the cloak behind him, turned around, and left the square with the entire patrol team. The remaining nobles looked at the decapitated Count Baboki. Everyone tacitly turned a blind eye to their former comrade. It was as if nothing had happened. Nothing had happened. They started to chat and laugh with each other, talking about things that happened all over the world but didn't end there. Then, they led their own attendants and gradually dispersed. However, perhaps only these nobles knew whether they really treated it as if nothing had happened. After all the vampires in the square had completely dispersed, a small patrol team slowly arrived and took away Count Baboki's body. No doubt, this was also Busby's order. Not long after, in a mobile building in the town, Busby was sitting on a single sofa and reading a document in his hand. This place was temporarily cleared out as an office. A housemaster died. Busby's voice was low as he casually slapped the document in his hand on the table in front of him. You didn't notice this at all before it happened. What has the farm's supervisor team been doing recently? The subordinate beside him couldn't help but shudder with fear. The scene of Sir Busby beheading a superior count was still vivid in his mind. He hurriedly explained in a panic, "Sir, Housemaster Tabanai obviously committed suicide to escape punishment. From the diary and the suicide note he left behind, he was afraid that he would be discovered one day, so he couldn't withstand the intense pressure and chose to commit suicide." Busby slowly raised his head, his eyes as sharp as an eagle's. "I'm asking why this housemaster's behavior hasn't been discovered until now. This is because Tabanai used hallucinogenic drugs every time. Those crops that he played with didn't have any memory of it. In addition, If a male is arranged to work in the farm, he would be castrated beforehand, so he couldn't do any substantial harm to the crops. So, Busby coldly asked again, I'll ask one more time, why hasn't Tabani's behavior been discovered until now? This time, the subordinate suddenly understood. This superior in front of him, who now had power, didn't need an explanation at all. He instantly shivered and hurriedly said, this time it's because the supervisor team of the farm didn't supervise properly. I'll immediately withdraw the supervisor here and punish them severely. Seeing that Busby's expression did not change, the subordinate braced himself and continued. Other than that, the other members of the supervision team will be punished to varying degrees. I will consider replacing a new batch of responsible members. Also, I will thoroughly investigate all the male dormitories and farm. We must prevent something like this from happening again. Busby shook his head and looked at the subordinate who was drenched in cold sweat. After a while, he said, Now, let's talk about the fugitive. Yes, only then did his subordinates calm down. This time, due to the large number of people from the inner tribe entering the farm, there was chaos. Those guys took advantage of the chaos to open the cages and leave. Currently, most of the fugitives have been caught, and only 4 are still outside. However, they shouldn't have gone far. I believe we'll be able to catch them soon. Go do what you should do. Busby suddenly waved his hand and then said, I'll go out for a while. Don't follow me. After that, he directly left. Looking at the direction, it seemed that he was going to the 7th dormitory where the murder happened.